are listening to the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, the saga of Flavius Clemens of Rome, Simon Peter of Galilee, and several of the forgotten apostles of Messiah Yeshua, a production of the Vero Essene Yahad. Contact us at www.yahad.me. Read by the editor, Jackson Snyder, at www.jacksonsnyder.com. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 5, Chapter 1, Kepha's Salutation. But on the following day, Kepha, rising a little earlier than usual, found us asleep. And when he saw it, he gave orders that silence should be kept for him, as though he himself wished to sleep longer, that we might not be disturbed in our rest. But when we rose, refreshed with sleep, we found him, having finished his prayer, waiting for us in his bedchamber. And as it was already dawn, he addressed us shortly, saluting us according to his custom, and forthwith proceeded to the usual place for the purpose of teaching. And when he saw that many had assembled there, having invoked shalom upon them according to his usual manner, he began to speak as follows. Chapter 2. Suffering the Effect of Sin. Elohim, the creator of all, at the beginning made man after his own image, and gave him dominion over the earth and sea, and over the air, as the Navi Emet has told us, and as the very reason of things instructs us. For man alone is rational, and it is fitting that reason should rule over the irrational. At first, therefore, while he was still righteous, he was superior to all disorders and all frailty. But when he sinned, as we taught you yesterday, and became the servant of sin, he became at the same time liable to frailty. This therefore is written, that men may know that, as by disobedience they have been made liable to suffer, so by obedience they may be made free from suffering. And not only free from suffering, but by even a little belief in Elohim be able to cure the sufferings of others. For thus the Navi Emet promised us, saying, Amen, I say to you, that if ye have faith, as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Remove hence, and it will remove. Of this saying you have yourselves also had proofs, for you saw yesterday how at our presence the demons removed and were put to flight with those sufferings that they had brought upon men. Chapter 3. Faith and Unbelief. Whereas, therefore, some men suffer and others cure those who suffer, it is necessary to know the cause at once of the suffering and the cure. And this is proved to be nothing else than unbelief on the part of the sufferers, and belief on the part of those who cure them. For unbelief, while it does not believe that there is to be a judgment of Elohim, affords license to sin, and sin makes men liable to sufferings. But faith, believing that there is to be a judgment of Elohim, restrains men from sin. And those who do not sin are not only free from demons and sufferings, but can also put to flight the demons and sufferings of others. Chapter 4. Ignorance, the mother of evils. From all these things, therefore, it's concluded that all evil springs from ignorance. And ignorance herself, the mother of all evils, is sprung from carelessness and sloth, and is nourished and increased and is rooted in the senses of men by negligence. That if anyone teach that she is to be put to flight, she is with difficulty and indignantly torn away, as from an ancient and hereditary abode. And therefore we must labor for a little, that we may search out the presumptions of ignorance, and cut them off by means of knowledge, especially in those who are preoccupied with some erroneous opinions, by means of which ignorance is the more firmly rooted in them, as under the appearance of a certain kind of knowledge. For nothing is worse than for one to believe that he knows what he is ignorant of, and to maintain that to be true that is false. This is as if a drunken man should think himself to be sober, and should act indeed in all respects as a drunken man, and yet think himself to be sober, and should wish to be called so by others. Thus, therefore, are those also who do not know what is true, yet some hold appearance of knowledge, and do many evil things as if they were good, and hasten destruction, as if it were to salvation. Chapter 5. Advantages of Knowledge. So we must, above all things, hasten to the knowledge of the truth, that, as with a light kindled thereat, we may be able to dispel the darkness of errors. For ignorance, as we have said, is a great evil, but because it has no substance, it's easily dispelled by those who are in earnest. For ignorance is nothing else than not knowing what is good for us. Once know this, and ignorance perishes. Therefore, the knowledge of the truth ought to be eagerly sought after, and no one can confer it except the Navi Emet. For this is the gate of life to those who will enter, and the road of good works to those going to the city of salvation. Chapter 6. Free Will. Whether anyone, truly hearing the word of the Navi Emet Yahshua, is willing or unwilling to receive it, and to embrace his burden, that is, the precepts of life, he has either in his power, for we are free in will. For if it were so, that those who hear had it not in their power to do otherwise than as they had heard, there were some power of nature in virtue of which it were not free to him to pass over to another opinion. Or if, again, no one of the hearers could at all receive it, this also were a power of nature that should compel the doing of some one thing, and should leave no place for the other course. But now, since it is free for the mind to turn its judgment to which side it pleases, and to choose the way that it approves, it is clearly obvious that there is in men a liberty of choice. Chapter 7. Responsibility of Knowledge. Therefore, before anyone hears what is good for him, it is certain that he is ignorant, and being ignorant, he wishes and desires to do what is not good for him. Therefore he is not judged for that. But when once he has heard the causes of his error, and has received the method of truth, then, if he remain in those errors with which he had been long ago preoccupied, he will rightly be called into judgment to suffer punishment, because he has spent in the sport of errors that portion of life that was given him to be spent in living well. But he who, hearing those things, willingly receives them, and is thankful that the teaching of good things has been brought to him, inquires more eagerly, and does not cease to learn, until he ascertains whether there be truly another world, in which rewards are prepared for the good. And when he is assured of this, he gives thanks to Yahweh, because he has shown him the light of truth, and for the future directs his actions in all good works, for which he is assured that there is a reward prepared in the world to come. While he constantly wonders and is astonished at the errors of other men, and that no one sees the truth that is placed before his eyes. Yet he himself, rejoicing in the riches of wisdom that he has found, desires insatiably to enjoy them, and is delighted with the practice of good works, hastening to attain, with a clean heart and a pure conscience, the world to come, when he will be able even to see Elohim, the Melech of all. Chapter 8. Desires of the flesh to be subdued. But the sole cause of our wanting and being deprived of all these things is ignorance. For while men do not know how much good there is in knowledge, they do not suffer the evil of ignorance to be removed from them. For they know not how great a difference is involved in the change of one of these things for the other. So I counsel every learner willingly to lend his ear to the word of Yahweh, and to hear with love of truth what we say, that his mind, receiving the best seed, may bring forth joyful fruits by good deeds. For if, while I teach the things that pertain to salvation, anyone refuses to receive them, and strives to resist them with a mind occupied by evil opinions, he will have the cause of his perishing, not from us, but from himself. For it is his duty to examine with just judgment the things that we say, and to understand that we speak the words of truth, that, knowing how things are, and directing his life in good actions, he may be found a partaker of the Malkuth Shamayim, subjecting to himself the desires of the flesh, and becoming master of them, that so at length he himself also may become the pleasant possession of the ruler of all. Chapter 9. The Two Kingdoms. For he who persists in evil and is the servant of evil cannot be made a portion of good so long as he persists in evil. Because from the beginning, as we've said, Elohim instituted two tribes and has given to each man the power of becoming a portion of that Malkuth to which he will yield himself to obey. Since it is decreed by Elohim that no man can be a servant of both kingdoms, therefore endeavor with all earnestness to commit yourselves to the covenant and Torah of the good king. So also the Navi Emet, when he was present with us and saw some rich men negligent with respect to the worship of Elohim, thus unfolded the truth of this matter. No one, said he, can serve two masters. You cannot serve Elohim and Mammon, calling riches, in the language of his country, Mammon. Chapter 10, Yeshua HaNavi Emet. He therefore is the Navi Emet who appeared to us, as you have heard, in Judea, who, standing in public places, by a simple command made the blind see, the deaf hear, cast out demons, restored health to the sick and life to the dead. And since nothing was impossible to him, he even perceived the thoughts of men, which is possible for none but Elohim only. He proclaimed the Malkuth of Elohim, and we believed him as a Navi Emet in all that he spoke, deriving the confirmation of our faith not only from his words, but also from his works, and also because the sayings of the Torah, which many generations before had set forth his coming, were fulfilled in him, and the figures of the doings of Moshe and of the patriarch Yaakov before him bore in all respects a type of him. It is evident also that the time of his advent, that is, the very time at which he came, was foretold by them, and above all, it was contained in the sacred writings, that he was to be waited for by the Goyim, and all these things were equally fulfilled in him. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 5, Chapter 11. Kepha speaking. But he whom a Navi of the Yehudaim foretold, that he was to be waited for by the Goyim, confirms above measure the truth of faith in him. For if he had said that he was to be waited for by the Yehudaim, he would not have seemed to prophesy anything extraordinary, that he whose coming had been promised for the salvation of the world should be the object of hope to the people of the same tribe with himself, and to his own tribe, for that this would take place would seem rather to be a matter of natural inference than one requiring the grandeur of prophetic utterance. But now, whereas the Naviim say that all that hope that is set forth concerning the salvation of the world, and the newness of the Malkuth that is to be established by Moshiach, and all things that are declared concerning him are to be transferred to the Goyim, the grandeur of the prophetic office is confirmed, not according to the sequence of things, but by an incredible fulfillment of the prophecy. For the Yehudim from the beginning had understood by most certain tradition that this man should at some time come, by whom all things should be restored, and daily meditating and looking out for his coming, when they saw him amongst them and accomplishing the signs and miracles, as had been written of him, being blinded with envy, they could not recognize him when present, in the hope of whom they rejoiced while he was absent. Yet the few of us who were chosen by him understood it. Chapter 12, Call of the Goyim. But this was all accomplished by Yahweh's providence, that the knowledge of this good one should be handed over to the Goyim, and those who had never heard of him, nor had learned from the Naviim, should acknowledge him, while those who had knowledge of him in their daily meditation should not know him. For behold, by you who are now present, who desire to hear the doctrine of his faith, and to know what and how and of what sort is his coming, the prophetic truth is fulfilled. For this is what the Naviim foretold, that he is to be sought for by you who never heard of him. And therefore, seeing that the prophetic sayings are fulfilled even in yourselves, you rightly believe in him alone. You rightly wait for him. You rightly inquire concerning him, that you not only may wait for him, but also believing you may obtain the inheritance of his kingdom, according to what he said himself, that everyone is made the servant of him to whom he yields subjection. Chapter 13. Invitation of the Goyim. So awake, and take yourselves our Master and Elohim, even that Master who is Yahweh both of sky and land, and conform yourselves to his image and likeness, as the Navi Emet himself teaches, saying, You all be merciful, as also your heavenly Father is merciful, who makes his sun to rise upon the good and the evil, and rains upon the just and the unjust. Imitate him, therefore, and fear him, as the commandment is given to men. You will worship Yahweh your Elohim, and him only will you serve. For it is profitable to you to serve this Master alone, that through him, knowing the one Elohim, ye may be freed from the many whom ye vainly feared. For he who fears not Elohim, the Creator of all, but fears those whom himself with his own hands has made, what does he do but make himself subject to a vain and senseless fear, and render himself more vile and abject than those very things, the fear of which he has conceived in his mind? But rather, by the goodness of him who invites you, return to your former nobleness, and by good deeds show that you bear the image of your Creator, that by contemplation of his likeness ye may be believed to be even his sons. Chapter 14. Idols Unprofitable. Begin, therefore, to cast out of your minds the vain ideas of idols, and your useless and empty fears, that at the same time you may also escape the condition of unrighteous bondage. For those have become your masters who could not even have been profitable servants to you. For how should lifeless images seem fit even to serve you, when they can neither hear, nor see, nor feel anything? Yea, even the material of which they are made, whether it be gold or silver, or even brass or wood, though it might have profited you for necessary uses, you have rendered wholly inefficient and useless by fashioning Elohim out of it. We therefore declare to you the true worship of Elohim, and at the same time warn and exhort the worshippers that by good deeds they imitate him whom they worship, and hasten to return to his image and likeness, as we said before. Chapter 15. Folly of Idolatry. But I should like if those who worship idols who would tell me if they wish to become like those whom they worship. Does any one of you wish to see in such sort as they see, or to hear after the manner of their hearing, or to have such understanding as they have? Far be this from any of my hearers, for this were rather to be thought a curse and a reproach to a man who bears in himself the image of Elohim, although he has lost the likeness. What sort of Elohim, then, are they to be reckoned, the imitation of whom would be disgusting to their worshippers, and to have whose likeness would be a reproach? What then? Melt your useless images. Make useful vessels. Melt the unserviceable and inactive metal, and make implements fit for the use of men. But, says one, human laws do not allow us. He says well, for it is human laws, and not their own power, that prevents it. What kind of Elohim, then, are those that are defended by human laws, and not by their own energies? And so also they are preserved from thieves by watchdogs and the protection of bolts, at least if they be of silver or gold or even brass. For those that are of stone and earthenware are protected by their own worthlessness, for no one will steal stone or crockery Elohim. Hence those seem to be the more miserable whose more precious metal exposes them to the greater danger, since then they can be stolen, since they must be guarded by men, since they can be melted and weighed out and forged with hammers. Ought men possessed of understanding to hold them as Elohim? Chapter 16. Yahweh alone a fit object to worship. Oh, into what wretched plight the imagination of men has fallen! For if it is reckoned the greatest folly to fear the dead, what will we judge of those who fear something that is worse than the dead are? For those images are not even to be reckoned among the number of the dead, because they were never alive. Even the sepulchres of the dead are preferable to them, since although they are now dead, yet they once had life. But those whom you worship never possessed even such base life as is in all, the life of frogs and owls. But why say more about them, since it is enough to say to him who adores them, Do you not see that he whom you adore sees not? Hear that he whom you adore hears not? And understands that he understands not? For he is the work of man's hand, and necessarily is void of understanding. You therefore worship an Elohim without sense, whereas everyone who has sense believes that not even those things are to be worshipped that have been made by the true Elohim and have sense, such as the sun, moon, and stars, and all things that are in the sky and upon the earth. For they think it reasonable that not those things that have been made for the service of the world, but the Creator of those things themselves, and of the whole world, should be worshipped. For even these things rejoice when he is adored and worshipped, and do not take it well that the honor of the Creator should be bestowed on the creation. For the worship of Elohim alone is acceptable, who alone is uncreated, and all things also are his creation. For as it belongs to him who alone is uncreated to be Yahweh, so everything that has been created is not truly Elohim. Chapter 17. Suggestions of the old serpent. Above all, therefore, you ought to understand the deception of the old serpent and his cunning suggestions, who deceives you as it were by prudence, and as by a sort of reason creeps through your senses, and beginning at the head, he glides through your inner marrow, accounting the deceiving of you a great gain. Therefore, he insinuates into your minds opinions of Elohim of whatsoever kinds, only that he may withdraw you from the faith of Yahweh Elohim, knowing that your sin is his comfort. For he, for his immorality, was condemned from the beginning to eat dust. For that he caused to be again resolved into dust him who had been taken from the dust, even till the time when your beings will be restored, being brought through the fire, as we will instruct you more fully at another time. From him, therefore, proceed all the errors and doubts by which you are driven from the faith and belief in one Elohim. Chapter 18. His first suggestion. And first of all, he suggests to men's thoughts not to hear the words of truth, by which they might put to flight the ignorance of those things that are evils. And this he does, as by the presentation of another knowledge, making a show of that opinion that very many hold, to think that they will not be held guilty if they have been in ignorance, and that they will not be called to account for what they have not heard, and thereby he persuades them to turn aside from hearing the word. But I tell you, in opposition to this, that ignorance is in itself a most deadly poison, which is sufficient to ruin the spirit without any aid from without. And therefore there is no one who is ignorant who will escape through his ignorance, but it is certain that he will perish, for the power of sin naturally destroys the sinner. But since the judgment will be according to reason, the cause and origin of ignorance will be inquired into, as well as of every sin. For he who is unwilling to know how he may attain to life, and prefers to be in ignorance, lest he thereby be made guilty, from this very fact is judged as if he knew and had knowledge. For he knew what it was that he was unwilling to hear, and the cunning obtained by the artifice of the serpent will avail him nothing for an excuse. For he will have to do with him to whom the heart is open. But that you may know that ignorance of itself brings destruction, I assure you that when the spirit departs from the body, if it leaves it in ignorance of him by whom it was created, and from whom in this world it obtained all things that were necessary for its uses, it is driven forth from the light of his Malkuth as ungrateful and unfaithful. Chapter 19. His second suggestion. Again, the immoral serpent suggests another opinion to men that many of you are in the habit of bringing forward, that there is, as we say, one Elohim who is master of all, but these also, they say, are Elohim.
For as there is one Kaiser, and he has under him many shoftim, for example, prefects, councils, tribunes, and other officers, in like manner we think that while there is one Elohim greater than all, yet still that these Elohim are ordained in the world, after the likeness of those officers of whom they have spoken, subject indeed to the greater Elohim, yet ruling us and the things that are in this world.
In answer to this, I'll show you how, in those very things that you propose for deception, you are confuted by the reasons of truth. You say
that Elohim occupies the place of Kaiser, and that those who are called Elohim represent his judges and officers.
Hold then. As you have adduced it by the example of Kaiser, and know that, as one of Kaiser's judges or administrators, as prefects, proconsuls, generals, or tribunes may lawfully take the name of Kaiser, or else both he who should take it and those who should confer it should be destroyed together, so also in this case you ought to observe that if anyone give the name of Elohim to anyone but Yahweh himself, and he accept it, they will partake one and the same destruction. For by a much more terrible fate than the servants of Kaiser. For he who offends against Kaiser will undergo corporeal destruction. But he who offends against him who is the sole and true Elohim will suffer ageless punishment, and that deservedly, as having injured by a wrongful condition the name that is unique. Chapter 20. The Idolatry of Mitzrayim. Although this word Elohim is not the name of Elohim, but meantime that word is employed by men as his name. Therefore, as I have said, when it is used reproachfully, the reproach is referred to the injury of the true name. In short, the ancient Mitzrayim, who thought that they had discovered the theory of the heavenly revolutions and the nature of the stars, nevertheless, through the demons blocking up of their senses, subjected the true name, Yahweh, to all kinds of indignity. For some taught that their ox, which is called Apis, ought to be worshipped. Others taught that the he-goat. Others that cats, the ibises, a fish also, a serpent, onions, drains, and even the breaking of wind ought to be regarded as deities, and innumerable other things which I am ashamed even to mention. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 5, Chapter 21, Idolatry of Mitzrayim, more reasonable than others. When Kepha was speaking thus, all we who heard him laughed. Then said Kepha, "You laugh at the absurdities of others because, through long custom, you do not see your own. For indeed, it's not without reason that you laugh at the folly of the Mitzrayim, who worship dumb animals, while they themselves are rational. But I will tell you how they also laugh at you, for they say, 'We worship living animals, though mortal, but you worship and adore things that never were alive at all.' They add this also, that they are figures and allegories of certain powers by whose help the race of men is governed. Taking refuge in this for shame, they fabricate these and similar excuses, and so endeavor to screen their error. But this is not the time to answer the Mitzrayim, and leaving the care of those who are present to heal the disease of the absent. For it is a certain indication that you are held to be free from sickness of this heart, since you do not grieve over it as your own, but laugh at it as that of others." Chapter 22. Second suggestion continued. But let us come back to you, whose opinion it is that Yahweh should be regarded as Kaiser, and the false Elohim as if they were the ministers and deputies of Kaiser. Follow me attentively, and I will presently show you the lurking places of the serpent, which lie in the crooked windings of this argument. It ought to be regarded by all as certain and beyond doubt that no creature can be on a level with Elohim, because he was made by none. but he made all things. Nor indeed can anyone be found so irrational as to suppose that the thing made can be compared with the maker. If therefore the human mind, not only by reason, but even by a sort of natural instinct, rightly holds this opinion, then how can it be supposed that that which is called Elohim, to which nothing can be compared or equaled, but that exceeds all and excels all, how can it be supposed that the name that is above all is rightly given to those false Elohim whom you think to be employed for the service and comfort of human life? This world was undoubtedly made and is corruptible, as we will show more fully as we go along. In the meantime, it is admitted both that it has been made and that it is corruptible. If therefore the world cannot be called Elohim, and rightly so, because it is corruptible, how will parts of the world take the name of Elohim? For inasmuch as the whole world cannot be Elohim, much more its parts cannot. Therefore, if we come back to the example of Caesar, you will see how far you are in error. It is not lawful for anyone, though a man of the same nature with him, to be compared with Caesar. Do you think, then, that anyone ought to be compared with Elohim, who excels all in this respect, which he was made by none, but he himself made all things? But indeed you dare not give the name of Caesar to any other, because he immediately punished one who offends against him. Yet you dare give that of Elohim to others, because he delays the punishment of offenders against him, in order to give them time for their repentance? Chapter 23, third suggestion. Through the mouths of others also that serpent is prone to speak in this manner.
We adore visible things in honor of the indivisible Elohim.
Now, this is most certainly false. For if you really wished to worship the image of Elohim, you would do good to man, and so worship the true image of Elohim in him. For the image of Elohim is in every man, though his likeness is not in all. But where the spirit is benign, and the mind is pure. If therefore you wish truly to honor the image of Elohim, we declare to you what is true, that you should do good to and pay honor and reverence to man, who is made in the image of Elohim, that you minister food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, clothing to the naked, hospitality to the stranger, and necessary things to the prisoner. And that is what will be regarded as truly bestowed upon Elohim. And so far do these things go to the honor of Elohim's image, that he who does not do these things is regarded as casting reproach upon Yahweh's image. What then is that honor of Elohim that consists in running from one stone or wooden figure to another, in venerating empty and lifeless figures as deities, and despising men in whom the image of Elohim is of a truth? Yea, rather be assured that whoever commits murder or adultery or anything that causes suffering or injury to men, in all these the image of Elohim is violated. For to injure men is a great offense toward Elohim. Whenever, therefore, you do to another what you would not have another do to you, you defile the image of Elohim with undeserved distresses. Understand, therefore, that that is the suggestion of the serpent lurking within you, who persuades you that you may seem to be obedient when you worship insensible things, and may not seem disobedient when you injure sensible and rational beings. Chapter 24, fourth suggestion. But to these things the serpent answers us with another mouth, and says,
If Yahweh did not wish these things to be, then they should not be.
I'm telling you how it is that many contrary things are permitted to be in this world for the probation of every one's mind. But this is what is suitable to be said in the meantime. If according to you everything that was to be worshipped ought not to have been, there would have been almost nothing in this world. For what is there that you have left without worshipping it? The sun, the moon, the stars, the water, the earth, mountains, trees, stones, men. There is no one of these that you have not worshipped. According to your saying, therefore, none of these things ought to have been made by Elohim, that you might not have anything that you could worship. Yea, he thought not even to have made men themselves to be the worshippers. But this is the very thing that the serpent that lurks within you desires, for he spares none of you. he would have no one of you escape from destruction. But it will not be so, for I tell you that not that which is worshipped is at fault, but he who worships. For with Yahweh is a righteous judgment, and he judges in one way the sufferer, and in another way the doer of wrong. Chapter 25, fifth suggestion. But you say,
but then those who adore what ought not to be adored should be immediately destroyed by Elohim to prevent others from doing that like.
But are you wiser than Elohim that you should offer him counsel? He knows what to do. For with all who are placed in ignorance he exercises patience, because he is merciful and gracious, and he foresees that many of the immoral become righteous, and that even some of those who worship impure statues and polluted images have been converted to Elohim, and forsaking their sins and doing good works, attain to salvation. But it is said,
we ought never to have come even to the thought of doing these things.
You do not know what freedom of will is, and you forgot that he is good who is so by his own intention. But he who is retained in goodness by necessity cannot be called good, because it's not of himself that he is so, because therefore there is in every one liberty to choose good or evil. He either acquires rewards or brings destruction on himself. Nay, it is said,
Elohim brings to our minds whatever we think.
What do you mean then, ye blaspheme? For if he brings all our thoughts into our minds, then it is he that suggests to us thoughts of adultery and covetousness and blasphemy and every kind of effeminacy. Cease, I entreat you, these blasphemies, and understand what is the honor worthy of Elohim, and say not, as some of you are likely to say, that
Elohim needs not honor from men.
Indeed, he truly is in need of none. But you ought to know that the honor that you bestow upon Elohim is profitable to yourselves. For what is so disgusting as for a man not to render thanks to his Creator? Chapter 26, sixth suggestion. But it is said,
we do better who give thanks both to himself and to all that are with him.
In this you do not understand that there is the ruin of your salvation. For it's as if a sick man should call in for his cure at once a physician and poisoners, since the latter could indeed injure him, but not cure him. And the true physician would refuse to mix his remedies with their poisons, lest either the man's destruction be ascribed to the good, or his recovery to the injurious. But you say,
is Elohim then indignant or envious if when he benefits us, our thanks be rendered to others?
Even if he be not indignant. At all events, he does not wish to be the author of error, which by means of his work credit should be given to a vain idol. And what is so evil and so ungrateful as to obtain a benefit from Elohim and to render thanks to blocks of wood and stone? So arise and understand your salvation, for Yahweh is in need of no one, nor does he require anything, nor is he hurt by anything. But we are either helped or hurt in that we are grateful or ungrateful. For what does Elohim gain from our praises? Or what does he lose by our blasphemies? Only this we must remember, that Elohim brings into proximity and friendship with himself the spirit that renders thanks to him. But the immoral demon possesses the ungrateful spirit. Chapter 27. Creation takes vengeance on sinners. But this also I would have you know, that upon such things Elohim does not take vengeance directly, but his whole creation rises up and inflicts punishment upon the immoral. And although in this present world the goodness of Yahweh bestows the light of the world, and the services of the earth alike upon the obedient and the disobedient, yet not without grief does the sun afford his light, and the other elements perform their service to the disobedient. And, in short, sometimes, even in opposition to the goodness of the Creator, the elements are wearied by the crimes of the immoral. And from there it is that either the fruit of the earth is blighted, or the composition of the air is corrupted, or the heat of the sun is increased beyond measure, or there's an excessive amount of rain or of cold. From their pestilence, famine, and death in various forms stalk forth. For the creation hastens to take vengeance on the immoral, yet the goodness of Elohim restrains it, bridles its indignation against the immoral, and compels it to be obedient to his mercy rather than to be inflamed by the sins and the crimes of men. For the patience of Elohim waits for the conversion of men as long as they are in this body. Chapter 28, Eternity of Punishments. But if any persist in immorality till the end of life, then as soon as the spirit, which is immortal, departs, it will pay the penalty of its persistence in immorality. For even the spirits of the disobedient are immortal, though it is likely they themselves would wish them to end with their bodies. But it is not so, for they endure without end the torments of ageless fire, and to their destruction they have not the quality of mortality. But maybe you will say to me,
"You terrify us, O Kepha."
and how will we speak to you the things that are in reality? Can we declare to you the truth by keeping silence? We cannot state the things otherwise than as they are. But if we were silent, we should make ourselves the cause of the ignorance that is ruinous to you, and should satisfy the serpent that lurks within you and blocks your senses, who cunningly suggests these things to you, that he should make you always the enemies of Yahweh. But we are sent for this end, that we may betray his disguises to you, and melting your enmities, may reconcile you to Elohim, that you may be converted to him, and may please him by good works. For man is at enmity with Elohim, and is in an unreasonable and rebellious state of mind and immoral disposition towards him, especially when he thinks that he knows something, and yet is in ignorance. But when you lay aside these, and begin to be pleased and displeased of the same things that please and displease Yahweh, and to will what Yahweh wills, then you will truly be called his Havorim. Chapter 29, Yahweh's care of human things. But maybe some of you will say,
Elohim hath no care of human beings, and if we cannot even attain to the knowledge of him, how will we attain to his friendship?
That Elohim does concern himself with the affairs of men. His government of the world bears witness, for the sun daily waits upon it, the showers minister it, the fountains, rivers, winds, and all elements attend upon it. And the more these things become known to men, the more they do indicate Yahweh's care over men. For unless by the power of the Most High El Elyon, the more powerful would never minister to the inferior, and by this Elohim is shown to have not only a care over men, but some great affection, since he has deputed such noble elements to their service. But that men may also attain to the friendship of Elohim is proved to us by the example of those to whose prayers he has been so favorable that he has withheld the sky and the rain when they wished, and has again opened it when they prayed. And many other things he has bestowed upon those who do his will, which could not be bestowed but upon his Havorim. But you will say,
What harm is done to Elohim if these things also are worshipped by us?
If any one of you should pay to another the honor that is due to his father, from whom he has received innumerable benefits, and should reverence a stranger and a foreigner as his father, should you not think that he was undutiful toward his father, and most deserving to be disinherited? Chapter 30, False Religions of Fathers to be Abandoned. Others say,
It is immoral if we do not worship those idols that have come down to us from our fathers, and prove false to the religion bequeathed to us by our ancestors.
On this principle, if anyone's father was a robber or a base fellow, he ought not to change the manner of life handed down to him by his fathers, nor to be recalled from his father's errors to a better way, and it is reckoned evil if one does not sin with his parents. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 5, Chapter 31, Paganism, Its Enormities. Kepha speaking. But some say, These things are instituted for the sake of joy, and for refreshing our minds, and they have been devised for this end, that the human mind may be relaxed for a little from cares and sorrows. See now what a charge you yourselves bring upon the things that you practice. If these things have been invented for the purpose of lightening sorrow and affording enjoyment, how is it that the invocations of demons are performed in groves and woods? What is the meaning of the insane whirlings, and the slashing of limbs, and the cutting off of members? How is it that mad rage is produced in them? How is insanity produced? How is it that women are driven violently, raging with disheveled hair? Whence the shrieking and gnashing of teeth? Whence the bellowing of the heart and the bowels, and all those things that, whether they are pretended or are contrived for the ministration of demons, are exhibited to the terror of the foolish and ignorant? Are these things done for the sake of lightening the mind, or rather for the sake of oppressing it? Do ye not yet perceive nor understand that these are the counsels of the serpent lurking within you, which draws you away from the apprehension of truth by irrational suggestions of errors, that he may hold you as slaves and servants of lust and obscenity and every disgraceful thing? Chapter 32. Obedience to Yahweh calls to sobriety and modesty. But I protest to you with the clear voice of preaching that, on the contrary, obeying Yahweh's Torah calls you to sobriety and modesty, orders you to refrain from effeminacy and madness, and by patience and gentleness to prevent the inroads of anger, to be content with your own possessions, and with the virtue of frugality, not even when driven by poverty to plunder the goods of others, but in all things to observe justice, to withdraw yourselves wholly from the idol Zebaim. For by these things you invite demons to you, and of your own accord give them the power of entering into you, and so you admit that, which is the cause either of madness or of false love removed from the Torah. Chapter 33. Origin of Immorality. Hence is the origin of all immorality, hence murders, adulteries, thefts, and a nursery is formed of all evils and immoralities, while you indulge in profane libations and odors, and give to immoral spirits an opportunity of ruling and obtaining some sort of authority over you. For when they invade your senses, what are they doing other than working the things that belong to lust and injustice and cruelty, and compel you to be obedient to all things that are pleasing to them? Elohim indeed permits you to suffer this at their hands by a certain righteous judgment, that from the very disgrace of your doings and your feelings you may understand how unworthy it is to be subject to demons and not to Elohim. Hence also, by the friendship of demons, men are brought to disgraceful and base deeds. Hence men proceed even to the destruction of life, either through the fire of lust, or through the madness of anger, through excess of grief, as it is well known. Some have even laid violent hands upon themselves. And this, as we have truly said, by a just sentence of Elohim they are not prevented from doing, that they may both understand to whom they have yielded themselves in subjection, and know whom they have forsaken. Chapter 34. Who are worshippers of Yahweh? But someone will say,
These passions sometimes befall even those who worship Yahweh.
It is not true. For we say that he is a worshipper of Elohim who does the will of Elohim and observes the precepts of his Torah. For in Elohim's estimation, he is not a Yehud who is called a Yehud among men, nor is he a Goy that is called a Goy, but he who, believing in Elohim, fulfills his Torah and does his will, though he be not circumcised. He is the true worshipper of Elohim, who not only is himself free from passions, but also sets others free from them. Though they are so heavy that they are like mountains, he removes them by means of the faith with which he believes in Elohim. Yea, by faith he truly removes mountains with their trees, if it be possible. But he who seems to worship Elohim, but is neither fortified by full faith, nor by obedience to the commandments, but is a sinner, has given a place in himself by reason of his sins to passions, which are appointed of Elohim for the punishment of those who sin, that they may exact from them the deserts of their sin by means of punishments inflicted, and may bring them purified to the general judgment of all, provided always that their faith do not fail them in their chastisement. For the chastisement of unbelievers in the present life is a judgment, by which they begin to be separated from future blessings. But the chastisement of those who worship Elohim, while it's inflicted upon them for sins into which they have fallen, exacts from them the due of what they have done, that before their judgment they may pay the debt of their sin in this present life, and be freed, at least in half, from the ageless punishments that are there prepared. Chapter 35. Judgment to come. But he who does not receive these things as true, who does not believe that there is to be a judgment by Elohim, and therefore, being bound by the pleasures of the present life, is shut out from ageless good things. And therefore, we do not neglect to proclaim to you what we know to be necessary for your salvation, and to show you what is the true worship of Elohim, that, believing in Elohim, you may be able, by means of good works, to be heirs with us of the world to come. But if you are not yet convinced that what we say is true, meantime, in the first instance, you ought not to take it amiss and to be hostile to us because we announce to you the things that we consider to be good, and because we do not grudge to bestow also upon you that which we believe brings salvation to ourselves, laboring, as I have said, with all eagerness, that we may have you as fellow heirs of the blessings that we believe are to befall yourselves. But whether those things that we declare to you are certainly true, you will not be able to know otherwise than by rendering obedience to the things that are commanded, that you may be taught by the issue of things, and the most certain end of blessedness. Chapter 36. Conclusion of Discourse. And therefore, although the serpent lurking within you occupies your senses with 1,000 arts of corruption, and throws in you away 1,000 obstacles by which he may turn you away from the hearing of saving instruction, all the more ought you to resist him, and despising his suggestions, to come together the more frequently to hear the word and receive instruction from us, because nobody can learn anything who is not taught. Then, when he was done speaking, he ordered those to be brought to him who were oppressed by sickness or demons, and he laid his hands upon them with prayer, and so he dismissed the crowds, charging them to resort to the hearing of the word during the days that he was to remain there. Therefore, when the crowds had departed, Kepha washed his body in the waters that ran through the garden, with as many of the others as chose to do so, and then ordered the couches to be spread on the ground under a very shady tree, and directed us to recline according to the order established at Caesarea. And thus, having taken food and given thanks to Elohim after the manner of the Hebrews, as there was yet some portion of the day remaining, he ordered us to question him on any matters that we pleased. And although we were with him 20 in all, he explained to everyone whatever he pleased to ask them, the particulars of which I set down in scrolls and sent to you some time ago, O Yaakov. And when evening came, we entered with him into the lodging, and went to sleep, each one in his own place. The end of the Nazarene Acts, Book 5. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 6, Chapter 1, Diligence in Study. But as soon as day began to advance the dawn upon the retiring darkness, Kepha, having gone into the garden to pray, and returning from there and coming to us by way of excuse for awakening, and coming to us a little later than usual, said this: Now that the springtime has lengthened the day, of course the night is shorter. If therefore one desires to occupy some portion of the night in study, he must not keep the same hours for waking at all seasons, but should spend the same length of time in sleeping, whether the night be longer or shorter, and be exceedingly careful that he do not cut off from the period that he has habitually keeps for study, and so add to his sleep and lessen his time of keeping awake. And this also is to be observed, or else, if sleep be interrupted while the food is still undigested, the undigested mass lead the mind, and by the exhalation of crude spirits render the inner sense confused and disturbed. It is right, therefore, that that part also be cherished with sufficient rest, so that those things being sufficiently accomplished that are due to it, the body may be able in other things to render due service to the mind. Chapter 2. Much to be done in a little time. When he had said this, as very many had already assembled in the accustomed place of the garden to hear him, Kepha went forth, and having saluted the crowds in his usual manner, began to speak as follows. Since indeed, as land neglected by the cultivator necessarily produces thorns and thistles, so your sense, by long neglect, has produced a plentiful crop of noxious opinions of things and dogmas of false science. There is need now of much care in cultivating the field of your mind, that the word of truth, which is the true and diligent husbandman of the heart, may cultivate it with continual instructions. It is therefore your part to render obedience to it, and to lop off superfluous occupations and anxieties, lest the noxious growth choke the good seed of the word. For it may be that a short and earnest diligence may repair a long time's neglect. For the time of every one's life is uncertain, and therefore we must hasten to salvation, apprehending that sudden death might seize upon him who delays. Chapter 3. Righteous Anger. And all the more eagerly must we strive on this account, that while there is time, the collected vices of evil custom may be cut off. And this you will not be able to do otherwise than by being angry with yourselves on account of your profitlessness and base doings. For this is righteous and necessary anger, by which everyone is indignant with himself and accuses himself for those things in which he has erred and done amiss. And by this indignation a certain fire is kindled in us, which, applied as it were to a barren field, consumes and burns up the roots of vile pleasure, and renders the soil of the heart more fertile for the good seed of the word of Yahweh. And I think that you have sufficiently worthy causes of anger from which that most righteous fire may be kindled, if you consider into what errors the evil of ignorance has drawn you, and how it has caused you to fall and rush headlong into sin, from what good things it has withdrawn you, and into what evils it has driven you, and, what is of more importance than all the rest, how it has made you liable to ageless punishments in the world to come. Is not the fire of most righteous indignation kindled within you for all these things, now that the light of truth has shone upon you? And does not the flame of that anger that is pleasing to Elohim rise within you, that every sprout may be burned up and destroyed from the root, if any shoot of evil concupiscence has budded within you? Chapter 4. Not shalom, but a sword. Hence also, he who has sent us, when he had come, and had seen that all the world had fallen into immorality, did not forthwith give shalom to him who is in error, lest he should confirm him in evil, but set the knowledge of truth in opposition to the ruins of ignorance of it. If men would repent and look upon the light of truth, they might rightly grieve that they had all been received and drawn away into the precipices of error, and might kindle the fire of salutary anger against the ignorance that had deceived them. On this account, therefore, he said, I've come to send fire on the earth, and how I wish that it were kindled. There is therefore a certain fight, which is to be fought by us in this life. For the word of truth and knowledge necessarily separates men from error and ignorance, as we often seen putrefied and dead flesh in the body separated by the cutting knife from its connection with the living members. Such is the effort produced by knowledge of the truth. For it's necessary that, for the sake of salvation, the son, for example, who has received the word of truth, be separated from his unbelieving parents. Or again, that the father be separated from his son, or the daughter from her mother. And in this manner the battle of knowledge and ignorance, of truth and error, arises between believing and unbelieving kinsmen and relations. And therefore he who has sent us said again, I am not come to send shalom on earth, but a sword. Chapter 5. How the fight begins. But if anyone say,
How does it seem right for men to be separated from their parents?
I will tell you how. Because if they remained with them in error, they would do no good to them, and they would themselves perish with them. It is therefore right and very right that he who will be saved be separated from him who will not. But observe this also, that this separation does not come from those who understand aright. for they wish to be with their relatives, to do them good, and to teach them better things. But it is the vice peculiar to ignorance, that it will not bear to have near in the light of truth, which confutes it, and therefore that separation originates with them. For those who receive the knowledge of the truth, because it's full of goodness, desire, if it be possible, to share it with all, as given by Yahweh, yea, even with those who hate and persecute them, for they know that ignorance is the cause of their sin. So in short, the Master himself, when he was being led to the stake by those who knew him not, prayed to the Father for his murderers, and said, Father, forgive their sin, for they know not what they do. The Talmudim also, in imitation of the Master, even when they were suffering, in like manner prayed for their murderers. But if we are taught to pray even for our murderers and persecutors, how ought we not to bear the persecutions of parents and relations, and to pray for their conversion? Chapter 6, Yahweh to be loved more than parents. Then let us consider carefully, in the next place, what reason we have for loving our parents. For this cause it is said we love them, because they seem to be the authors of our life. But our parents are not authors of our life, but means of it. For they do not bestow life, but afford the means of our entering into this life, while the one and sole author of life is Yahweh. If therefore we would love the author of our life, let us know that it is he that is to be loved. But then it is said, We cannot know him, but them we know, and hold in affection. Be it so. You cannot know what Elohim is, but you can very easily know what Elohim is not. For how can any man fail to know that wood or stone or brass or other such matter is not Elohim? But if you will not give your mind to consider the things that you might easily apprehend, it is certain that you are hindered in the knowledge of Elohim, not by impossibility, but by indolence. For if you had wished it, even from these useless images, you might have been set on the way of understanding. Chapter 7, The Earth Made for Man. For it is certain that these images are made with iron tools. But iron is wrought by fire, which fire is extinguished by water. But water is moved by wind, and wind has its beginning from Yahweh. For thus says the Navi Moshe, In the beginning Elohim made the skies and the earth, but the earth was invisible and unarranged. And darkness was over the deep, and the Ruach of Elohim was upon the waters. Which Ruach, like the Creator's hand, by command of Elohim separated light from darkness, and after that invisible sky produced this visible one, that he might make the higher places a habitation for Malachim, and the lower for men. And for your sake, therefore, by command of Elohim, the water that was upon the face of the earth withdrew, that the earth might produce fruits for you. And into the earth also he inserted veins of moisture, that fountains and rivers might flow forth from it for you. For your sake it was commanded to bring forth living creatures and all things that could serve for your use and pleasure. Is it not for you that the winds blow, that the earth conceived by them may bring forth fruits? Is it not for you that the showers fall, and the seasons change? Is it not for you that the sun rises and sets, and the moon undergoes her changes? For you the sea offers its service, that all things may be subjected to you, ungrateful as you are. For all these things will there not be a righteous punishment of vengeance, because beyond all else you are ignorant of the bestower of all these things, whom you ought to acknowledge and reverence above all. Chapter 8, Necessity of Mikvah. But now I lead you to understand by the same paths. For you see that all things are produced from waters. But water was made at first by the only begotten, and the Almighty Elohim is the head of the only begotten, by whom we come to the Father in such order as we have stated above. But when you have come to the Father, you will learn that this is his will, that you be born anew by means of waters, which were the first created. For he who is regenerated by water, having filled up the measure of good works, is made heir of him by whom he has been regenerated in incorruption. So with prepared minds approach as sons to the Father, that your sins may be washed away, and it may be proven before Elohim that ignorance was their sole cause. For if, after learning of these things, you remain in unbelief, the cause of your destruction will be imputed to yourselves, and not to ignorance. And do you suppose that you can have hope towards Elohim, even if you cultivate all obedience and all righteousness, but do not receive mikvah? Yea, rather, he will be worthy of greater punishment, who does good works not well. For merit accrues to men from good works, but only if they be done as Elohim commands. Now Elohim has ordered everyone who worships him to be sealed by mikvah. But if you refuse and obey your own will rather than Yahweh's, you are doubtless contrary and hostile to his will. Chapter 9. Use of mikvah. But maybe you will say,
What does this mikvah in water contribute toward the worship of Elohim?
In the first place, because that which has pleased Elohim is fulfilled. In the second place, because when you are regenerated and born again of water and of Elohim, the frailty of your former birth, which you have through men, is cut off, and so at length you will be able to attain salvation. But otherwise it is impossible. For thus has the Navi Emet testified to us with an oath. Amen, I say to you, that unless a man is born again of water and of the Ruach, he will not enter into the Malkuth Shamayim. Therefore make haste. For there is in these waters a certain power of mercy that was born upon them at the beginning, and acknowledges those who are immersed under the name of the Master Yeshua, and rescues them from future punishments, presenting as a gift to Elohim the spirits that are set apart by mikvah. Commit yourselves therefore to these waters, for they alone can quench the violence of the future fire. And he who delays to approach to them, it is evident that the idol of unbelief remains in him, and by it he is prevented from hastening to the waters that confer salvation. For whether you be righteous or unrighteous, mikvah is necessary for you in every respect. For the righteous, that perfection may be accomplished in him, and he may be born again to Elohim. For the unrighteous, that pardon may be guaranteed him for sins that he has committed in ignorance. Therefore all should hasten to be born again to Elohim without delay, because the end of everyone's life is uncertain. Chapter 10. The necessity of good works. But when you have been regenerated by the waters of the mikvah, you must show by good works the likeness in you of the Father who has begotten you. Now that you know Yahweh, honor him as Father. And his honor is that you live according to his will. And his will is that you so live as to know nothing of murder or adultery, to flee from hatred and covetousness, to put away anger, pride, and boasting, to abhor envy, and to count all such things entirely unsuitable to you. There is truly a certain peculiar observance of our way of life, which is not so much imposed upon men as it is sought out by every worshipper of Elohim by reason of its purity. By reason of chastity, I say, of which there are many kinds, but first, that everyone be careful that he come not near a menstruous woman, for this the Torah of Elohim regards as detestable. But though the Torah had given no admonition concerning these things, should we willingly, like beetles, roll ourselves in filth? For we ought to have something more than the animals, as reasonable men and capable of heavenly senses, whose chief study it ought to be to guard the conscience from every defilement of the heart. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 6, Chapter 11, Inward and Outward Cleansing. Moreover, it is good and tends to purity also, to wash the body with water. I call it good, not as if it were the prime good of the purifying of the mind, but because this of the washing of the body is the sequel of the good. For so also our Master rebuked some of the Prushim and Sophrim, who seemed to be better than others, separating from the people, calling them hypocrites, because they purified only those things that were seen of men, but left defiled and sordid their hearts, which Yahweh alone sees. To some therefore of them, not to all, he said, Woe to you, Sophrim and Prushim, hypocrites, because you cleanse the outside of the cup and platter, but the inside is full of pollution. O blind Prushim, make first clean what is within, and what is without will be clean also. For truly the mind be purified by the light of knowledge. When once it is clean and clear, then it necessarily takes care of that which is on the outside of a man, that is his flesh, that it also may be purified. But when that which is on the outside, the cleansing of the flesh, is neglected, it is certain that there is no care taken of the purity of the mind and the cleanness of the heart. Thus, therefore, it comes to pass that he who is clean inwardly is without doubt cleansed outwardly also, but not always that he who is clean outwardly is also cleansed inwardly, to wit, when he does these things only that he may please men. Chapter 12. Importance of chastity. But this kind of chastity is also to be observed, that sexual intercourse must not take place heedlessly and for the sake of mere pleasure, but for the sake of begetting children. And since this observance is found even amongst some of the lower animals, it would be a shame if it be not observed by men, reasonable and worshipping Yahweh. But there is this further reason why chastity should be observed by those who hold the trite worship of Elohim, in those forms of it of which we have spoken, and others of like sort, that it is observed strictly even amongst those who are still held by the devil in error. For even amongst them there is in some degree the observance of chastity. What then? Will you not observe, now that you are reformed, what you observed when you were in error? Chapter 13. Superiority of Moshiach's morality. But maybe some one of you will say,
Must we then observe all things that we did while we worshipped idols?
Not at all, but whatever things were done well, these you ought to observe even now. Because if anything is rightly done by those who are in error, it is certain that this is derived from the truth. Whereas, if anything is not rightly done in the true obedience, that is, without doubt, borrowed is borrowed from error. For good is good, though it be done by those who are in error, and evil is evil, though it be done by those who follow the truth. Or will we be so foolish that if we see a worshipper of idols to be sober, we will refuse to be sober, lest we should seem to do the same things as he does who worships idols? It's not so. But let this be our study, that if those who err do not commit murder, we should not even be angry. If they do not commit adultery, we should not even covet another's wife. If they love their neighbors, we should love even more our enemies. If they lend to those who have the means of paying, we should give to those from whom we do not hope to receive anything. And in all things, we who hope for the inheritance of the ageless world ought to excel those who know only the present world, knowing that if their works, when compared with our works, be found like and equal in the day of judgment, there will be confusion to us, because we are found equal in our works to those who are condemned on account of ignorance, and had no hope of the world to come. Chapter 14. Knowledge enhances responsibility. And truly, confusion is our worthy portion if we have done no more than those who are inferior to us in knowledge. But if it be confusion to us to be found merely equal to them in works, what will become of us if the examination that is to take place find us inferior or worse than they are? Hear therefore how our Navi Emet has taught us concerning these things. For with respect to those who neglect to hear the words of wisdom, he speaks thus: The queen of the south will rise in judgment with this generation, and will condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Shlomo. And behold, a greater than Shlomo is here, and they hear him not. But with respect to those who refuse to repent of their evil deeds, he spoke thus: The men of Nineveh will rise up in the judgment with this generation, and will condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Yonah. And behold, a greater than Yonah is here. You see, therefore, how he condemned those who were instructed out of the Torah by adducing the example of those who came from the Goyim in ignorance, and showing that the former were not even equal to those who seemed to live in error. For all these things, then, the statement that he propounded is proven, that chastity, which is observed to a certain extent even by those who live in error, should be held much more purely and strictly in all its forms, as we have already shown, by us who follow the truth, and the rather because with us ageless rewards are assigned to its observance. Chapter 15. Mivakarim, Zakenim, Azarim, and widows appointed. When he had said these things and others to the same effect, he dismissed the crowds, and having, according to his custom, supped with his Havarim, he went to sleep. And while in this manner he was teaching the word of Yahweh for 3 whole months, and converting multitudes to the faith, at last he ordered me to fast. And after the fast he conferred on me the mikvah of ever-flowing water in the fountains adjoining the sea. And when, for the favor of regeneration divinely conferred upon me, we had joyfully kept holiday with our brothers, Kipha ordered those who had been appointed to go before him to proceed to Antioch, and there to wait for 3 months more. And they having gone, he himself led down to the fountains which, I have said, are near the sea, those who had fully received the faith of Yahweh, and immersed them. And celebrating the Passover with them, he appointed as Mivakar over them Maro, who had entertained him in his house, and who was now perfect in all things, and with him he appointed 12 Zakanim and attendants at the same time. He also instituted the order of widows, and arranged all the services of the Kahal, and charged them all to obey Maro, their Mivakar, in all things, that he should command them. And thus all things being suitably arranged, when the 3 months were fulfilled, we bade farewell to those who were at Tripolis, and set out for Antioch. This is the end of Book 6 of the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles.
The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 7, Chapter 1, Journey from Tripolis. Clement speaking. At length, leaving Tripolis, a city of Phoenicia, we made our first halt at Ortosius, not far from Tripolis, and there we remained the next day also, because almost all those who had believed in Master Yahshua, unable to part from Kipha, followed him thus far. From there we came to Anthoratus, but because there were many in our company, Kipha said to Niceta and Aquila, As there are immense crowds of brothers with us, and we bring upon ourselves no little envy as we enter into every city, it seems to me that we must take means, without doing so unpleasing a thing as to prevent their following us, to secure that the immoral one will not stir up envy against us on account of any display. I wish, therefore, that you, Niceta and Aquila, would go before us with them, so that you may lead the multitude divided into 2 sections, that we may enter every city of the Goyim traveling apart, rather than in one assemblage. Chapter 2. Talmudim divided into 2 bands. But I know that you think it sad to be separated from me for the space of at least 2 days. Believe me, that in whatever degree you love me, my word to you is 10-fold greater. But if by reason of our mutual affection we will not do the things that are right and honorable, such love will appear to be unreasonable. And therefore, without reducing in the least our love, let us attend to those things that seem useful and necessary, especially since not a day can pass in which you may not be present at my discussions. For I propose to pass through the most noted cities of the provinces one by one, as you also know, and to reside 3 months in each for the sake of teaching. Now, therefore, go before me to Laodike, which is the nearest city, and I will follow you after 2 or 3 days, so far as I purpose. But you will wait for me at the inn nearest to the gate of the city, and from there again, when we have spent a few days there, you will go before me to more distant cities. And this I wish you to do at every city, for the sake of avoiding envy as much as in us lies, and also that the brothers who are with us, finding lodgings prepared in the several cities by your foresight, may not seem to be vagabonds. Chapter 3. Order of March.
When Kepha thus spoke, they of course acquiesced, saying, "It does not greatly sadden us to do this, because we are ordered by you, who have been chosen by the foresight of Moshiach to do and to counsel well in all things, but also because, while it is a heavy loss not to see our master Kepha for 1, or may it be 2 days, yet it is not intolerable, and we think of our 12 brothers who go before us, and who are deprived of the advantage of hearing and seeing you for a whole month out of the 3 days you stay in every city. Therefore we will not delay doing as you order, because you order all things aright." And thus saying, they went forward, having received instructions that they should speak to the brothers who journeyed with them outside the city, and request them not to enter the cities in a crowd and with tumult, but apart and divided. Chapter 4. Clement's joy at remaining with Kepha. But when they were gone, I, Clement, rejoiced greatly because he had kept me with himself. And I said to him, "I give thanks to Elohim that you have not sent me forward with the others, for I should have died through sadness." Then said Kepha, "And what will the result be if necessity will demand that you be sent anywhere for the purpose of teaching? Would you die if you were separated from me for a good purpose? Would you not put a restraint upon yourself to bear patiently what necessity has laid upon you? Or do you not know that Havorim are always together, and are joined in memory, though they be separated bodily, as on the other hand, some persons are near to one another in body, but are separated in mind?" Chapter 5. Clement's affection for Kepha. Then I answered, "Oh, think not, my master, that I suffer these things unreasonably, but there is a certain cause and reason of this affection of mine toward you, for I have you alone as the object of all my affections, instead of father or mother and brothers. But above all this, it is the fact that you alone are the cause of my salvation and knowledge of the truth. And also, this I do not count as of least importance, that my youthful age is subject to the snares of lust, and I am afraid to be without you, by whose sole presence all effeminacy, however irrational it may be, is put to shame, although I trust, by the mercy of Elohim, that even my mind, from what it has conceived through your instruction, will be unable to receive aught else into its thoughts. Besides, I remember your saying at Caesarea, 'If anyone wishes to accompany me without violating dutifulness, let him accompany me.' And by this you meant that he should not make anyone sad, to whom he ought, according to Yahweh's appointment, to cleave. For example, that he should not leave a faithful wife, or parents, or the like. But from these I am entirely free, and so I am fit for following you, and I wish you would grant me that I might perform to you the service of a servant." Chapter 6. Kepha's simplicity of life. Then Kepha, laughing, said, "Oh, and do you not think, Clement, that this very necessity must make you my servant? For who else can spread my sheets and arrange my beautiful coverlets? Who will be at hand to keep my rings and prepare my robes, which I must be constantly changing? Who will superintend my cooks and provide various and choice meats to be prepared by my most complicated and various art? And all those things that are procured at enormous expense, and are brought together for men of delicate upbringing, yea, rather, for their appetite, as for some enormous beast? But maybe, although you live with me, you do not know my manner of life. I live on bread alone, with olives, and seldom even with pot herbs. And my dress is what you see, a tunic with a talit, and having these I require nothing more. This is sufficient for me, because my mind does not regard things present, but things ageless, and therefore no present and visible thing delights me. Whence I embrace and admire indeed your good mind toward me. I commend you the more, because though you have been accustomed to so great abundance, you have been able so soon to abandon it, and to accommodate yourself to this life of ours, which makes use of necessary things alone. For we, that is, I and my brother Adamya have grown up from our childhood not only orphans, but also extremely poor, and through necessity have become used to labor, whence now also we easily bear the fatigues of our journeys. But rather, if you would consent and follow it, I, who am a working man, could more easily discharge the duty of a servant to you. Chapter 7. Kepha's Humility. But I, Clement, trembled when I heard this, and my tears immediately gushed forth, because so great a man, who is worth more than the whole world, had addressed such a proposal to me. Then he, when he saw me weeping, inquired the reason, and I answered him, How have I so sinned against you, that you should distress me with such a proposal? Then Kepha, if it is evil that I said I should serve you, you were first in fault in saying the same thing to me. Then said I, The cases are not alike, for it becomes me to do this to you. But it is grievous that you who are sent as the herald of Yahweh El Shaddai, to save the spirits of men, should say it to me. Then said Kepha, I should agree with you, were it not that our master Yeshua, who came for the salvation of the whole world, and who was nobler than any of his creation, submitted to be a servant, that he might persuade us not to be ashamed to perform the ministry of servants to our brothers. Then said I, Clement, it were foolishness in me to suppose that I can prevail with you. Nevertheless, I give thanks to the providence of Elohim, because I have merited to have you instead of parents. Chapter 8. Clement's Family History. Then said Kepha, Is there then no one of your family surviving? I answered, There are indeed many powerful men, coming of the stock of Caesar. For Caesar himself gave a wife to my father, as being his relative, and educated along with him, and of a suitably noble family. But by her my father had twin sons, born before me, not very like one another, as my father told me, for I never knew them. But indeed I have not a distinct recollection even of my mother, but I cherish the remembrance of her face, as if I had seen it in a dream. My mother's name was Methulia, my father's Faustinianus, my brother's Faustinus and Faustus. Now, when I was barely 5 years old, my mother saw a vision, so I learned from my father, by which she was warned that, unless she speedily fled the city of her twin sons, and was absent for 10 years, she and her children should perish by a miserable fate. Chapter 9. Disappearance of his mother and brothers. Then my father, who tenderly loved his sons, put them on board a ship with their mother, and sent them to Athens to be educated, with slaves and maidservants, and a sufficient supply of money, retaining me only to be a comfort to him, and thankful for this, that the vision had not commanded me also to go with my mother. And at the end of a year my father sent men to Athens with money for them, desiring also to know how they did, but those who were sent never returned. Again in the 3rd year, my sorrowful father sent other men with money, who returned in the 4th year, and related that they had seen neither my mother nor my brothers, that they had never reached Athens, and that no trace had been found of any one of those who had been with them. Chapter 10. Disappearance of his father. My father, hearing this, and confounded with excessive sorrow, not knowing whither to go or where to seek, went down with me to the harbor, and began to ask of the sailors whether any of them had seen or heard of the bodies of a mother and 2 little children being cast ashore anywhere 4 years ago. At that time one told one story and another, but nothing definite was disclosed to us searching in this boundless sea. Yet my father, by reason of the great affection that he bore to his wife and children, was fed with vain hopes, until he thought of placing me under guardians and leaving me at Rome, as I was now 12 years old, and himself going in quest of them. Therefore, he went down to the harbor weeping, and going on board a ship took his departure. And from that time till now I have never received any letters from him, nor do I know whether he is alive or dead. But I rather suspect that he also has perished, either through a broken heart or by shipwreck. For 20 years have now elapsed since then, and no tidings of him have ever reached me. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 7, Chapter 11. Different Effects of Suffering on Heathens and Believers. Kepha, hearing this, shed tears of sympathy, and said to his Havarim who were present, "If any man who is a worshipper of Elohim had endured what this man's father has endured, immediately men would assign his belief as the cause of his calamities. But when these things come upon miserable goyim, they charge their misfortunes upon fate. And I call them miserable because they are both vexed with errors here and are deprived of future hope. Whereas, when the worshippers of Yahweh suffer these things, their patient endurance of them contributes to their cleansing from sin." Chapter 12. Excursion to Aradus. After this, one of those present began to ask Kepha that early next day we should go to a neighboring island called Aradus, which was not more than 6 furlongs 3/4 of a mile off, to see a certain wonderful work that was in it, namely, vine-wood columns of immense size. To this Kepha assented, as he was very kind. But he charged us that, when we left the ship, we should not rush altogether to see it. "For," said he, "I do not wish you to be noticed by the crowd." When therefore next day we reached the isle by the ship in the course of an hour forthwith, we hastened to the place where the wonderful columns were. They were placed in a certain hekel, in which there were very magnificent works of Phidias, on which every one of us gazed earnestly. Chapter 13. The Beggar Woman. But when Kepha had admired only the columns, being nowise ravished with the favor of the painting, he went out and saw before the gates a poor woman asking alms of those who went in. And looking earnestly at her, he said, "Tell me, woman, what member of your body is wanting, that you subject yourself to the indignity of asking alms, and do not rather gain your bread by laboring with your hands that Elohim has given you?" But she, sighing, said, "Would that I had hands that could be moved, but now only the appearance of hands has been preserved, for they are lifeless, and have been rendered feeble and without feeling by my knowing of them." Then Kepha said, "What has been the cause of your inflicting so great an injury upon yourself?" "Want of courage," said she, "and nothing else. For if I had any bravery in me, I could either have thrown myself from a precipice, or cast myself into the depths of the sea, and so ended my griefs." Chapter 14. The Woman's Grief. Then Kepha said, "Do you think, O woman, that those who destroy themselves set free from torments, and not rather that the spirits of those who lay violent hands upon themselves are subjected to greater punishments?" Then said she, "I wish I were sure that spirits live in the infernal regions, for I would gladly embrace the suffering of the penalty of suicide, only that I might see my darling children, if it were but for an hour." Then Kepha, "What thing is so great that affects you with so heavy a sadness? I should like to know. For if you inform me of the cause, I might be able both to show you clearly, O woman, that spirits do live in the infernal regions, and instead of the precipice or the deep sea, I might give you some remedy, that you may be able to end your life without torment." Chapter 15. The Woman's Account. Then the woman, hearing this welcome promise, began to say, "It is neither easy of belief, nor do I think it necessary to tell what is my extraction, or what is my country. It is enough only to explain the cause of my grief, while I rendered my hands powerless by gnawing them. Being born of noble parents and having become the wife of a suitably powerful man, I had twin sons, and after them one other. But my husband's brother was vehemently inflamed with illegitimate love toward me, and as I value chastity above all things, I would neither consent to so great immorality, nor wish to disclose to my husband the baseness of his brother. I considered whether in any way I could escape, nor wish to disclose to my husband the baseness of his brother. I considered whether in any way I could escape unpolluted, and yet not set brother against brother, and so bring the whole race of a noble family into disgrace. So I made up my mind, therefore, to leave my country with my twins, until the incestuous love should subside, which the sight of me was fostering and inflamed, and I thought that our other son should remain to comfort his father to some extent. Chapter 16. The woman's account continued. Now, in order to carry out this plan, I pretended that I had had a dream, in which some deity stood by me in a vision, and told me that I should immediately depart from the city with my twins, and should be absent until he should command me to return, and that, if I did not do so, I should perish with all my children. And so it was done. For as soon as I told the dream to my husband, he was terrified, and sending with me my twin sons, and also slaves and maidservants, and giving me plenty of money, he ordered me to sail to Athens, where I might educate my sons, and that I should stay there until he who commanded me to depart should give me leave to return. While I was sailing along with my sons, I was shipwrecked in the night by the violence of the winds, and, wretch that I am, was driven to this place. And when all had perished, powerful wave caught me and cast me upon the rock. And while I sat there with this only hope, that I might be able to find my sons, I did not throw myself into the deep, although then my spirit, disturbed and drunken with grief, had both the courage and the power to do it. Chapter 17. The woman's account continued. But then the day dawned, and I with shouting and howling was looking around if I could see the corpses of my woeful sons anywhere washed ashore. Some of those who saw me were moved with compassion and searched, first over the sea and then along the shores, if they could find either of my children. But when neither of them anywhere was found, the woman of that place, taking pity on me, began to comfort me, everyone telling her own griefs, that I might take consolation from the likeness of their calamities to my own. But this saddened me all the more, for my disposition was not such that I could regard the misfortunes of others as comforts to me. And when many desired to receive me hospitably, a certain poor woman who dwells here constrained me to enter into her hut, saying that she had had a husband who was a sailor, and that he had died at sea while a young man, and that although many afterwards asked her in marriage, she preferred widowhood through love of her husband. Therefore, said she, we will share whatever we can gain by the labor of our hands. Chapter 18. The woman's account continued. And, not to detain you with a long and profitless story, I willingly dwelt with her on account of the faithful affection that she retained for her husband. But not long after, my hands, melancholy woman that I was, long torn with gnawing, became powerless, and she who had taken me in fell into palsy, and now lies at home in her bed. Also the affection of those women who had formerly pitied me grew cold. We are both helpless. I, as you see, sit begging, and when I get anything, one meal serves two wretches. Behold, now you've heard enough of my affairs. Why do you delay the fulfillment of your promise to give me a remedy by which both of us may end our miserable lives without torment? Chapter 19. Kipha's reflection on her account. While she was speaking, Kepha, being distracted with much thought, stood like one thunderstruck. And I, Clement, coming up, said, I have been seeking you everywhere, and now what are we going to do? But he commanded me to go before him to the ship, and there to wait for him. And because he must not be opposed, I did as he commanded me. But he, as he afterwards told me the whole thing, being struck with a sort of suspicion, asked of the woman her family and her country, and the names of her sons. And straightway, he said, if you tell me these things, I will give you the remedy. But she, like one suffering violence, because she would not confess these things, and yet was desirous of the remedy, feigned one thing after another, saying that she was an Ephesian, and her husband a Cilician, and giving false names to her sons. And Kepha, supposing that she had answered truly, said, Alas, O woman, I thought that some great joy should spring up to us today, for I suspected that you were a certain woman, concerning whom I lately learned certain like things. But she adjured him, saying, I entreat you to tell me what they are, that I may know if amongst women there be one more accursed than myself. Chapter 20. Kepha's statement to the woman. Then Kepha, incapable of deception and moved with compassion, began to say, There is a certain young man among those who follow me for the sake of belief and obedience, a Roman citizen, who told me that he had a father and twin brothers, of whom not one is left to him. My mother, he said, as I learned from my father, saw a vision that she should depart from the Roman city for a time with her twin sons, else they should perish by a dreadful death. And when she had departed, she was never more seen. And afterwards his father set out to search for his wife and sons, and was also lost. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 7, Chapter 21, A Discovery. When Kepha had thus spoken, the woman, struck with astonishment, fainted. Then Kepha began to hold her up and to comfort her, and to ask what the matter was, or what she suffered. But she at length, with difficulty recovering her breath, and nerving herself up to the greatness of the joy that she hoped for, and at the same time wiping her face, said, Is he here, the youth of whom you speak? But Kepha, when he understood the matter, said, Tell me first, or else you will not see him. Then she said, But I am the mother of the youth. Then says Kepha, What is his name? And she answered, Clement. Then said Kepha, It is himself, and he it was that spoke with me just a little while ago, and whom I ordered to go before me to the ship. Then she fell down at Kepha's feet, and began to entreat him that he would hasten to the ship. Then Kepha said, Yes, if you will promise me that you will do as I say. Then she said, Oh, I will do anything. Only show me my only son, for I think that in him I will see my twins also. And Kepha said, When you have seen him, remain apart for a little time, until we leave the island. I will do so, she said. Chapter 22. A Joyful Meeting. Then Kepha, holding her hand, led her to the ship. And when I saw him giving his hand to the woman, I began to laugh. Yet, approaching to do him honor, I tried to substitute my hand for his, and to support the woman. But as soon as I touched her hand, she uttered a loud scream, and rushed into my embrace, and began to devour me with a mother's kisses. But I, being ignorant of the whole matter, pushed her off as a mad woman, and at the same time, though with reverence, I was somewhat angry with Kepha. Chapter 23. A Miracle. But he said, Cease! What are you doing, O Clement, my son? Do not push away your mother. But as soon as I heard these words, immediately bathed in tears, I fell upon my mother, who had fallen down, and I began to kiss her. For as soon as I heard, by degrees I recalled her countenance to my memory, and the longer I gazed, the more familiar it grew to me. Meantime, a great multitude assembled, hearing that the woman who used to sit and beg was recognized by her son, who was a good man. And when we wished to sail hastily away from the island, my mother said to me, "Oh, my darling son, it is right that I should bid farewell to the woman who took me in, for she is poor, a paralytic and bedridden." When Kepha and all who were present heard this, they admired the goodness and prudence of the woman, and immediately Kepha ordered some to go and to bring the woman in her bed as she lay. And when she had been brought and placed in the midst of the crowd, Kepha said in the presence of all, "If I am a preacher of truth, for confirming the faith of all those who stand by, that they may know and believe that there is one Elohim who made the sky and earth, in the name of Yahshua HaMashiach, let this woman rise." And as soon as he had said this, she arose whole, and fell down at Kepha's feet, and greeting her friend and acquaintance with kisses, asked of her what was the meaning of it all. But she shortly related to her the whole proceeding of the recognition, so that the crowd standing around wondered. Chapter 24. Departure from Aradus. Then Kepha, so far as he could, and as time permitted, addressed the crowds on the faith of Elohim and the commandments of the Torah, and then added that if anyone wished to know more accurately about these things, he should come to Antioch, where, said he, we have resolved to stay 3 months and to teach fully the things that pertain to salvation. For if, said he, men leave their country and their parents for commercial or military purposes, and do not fear to undertake long voyages, why should it be thought burdensome or difficult to leave home for 3 months for the sake of ageless life? When he had said these things, and more to the same purpose, I presented 1,000 drachmas to the woman who had been so hospitable to my mother, and who had recovered her health by means of Kepha, and in the presence of all committed her to the charge of a certain good man, the chief person in that town, who promised that he would gladly do what we requested of him. I also distributed a little money among some others, and among those women who were said formerly to have comforted my mother in her miseries, to whom I also expressed my thanks. And after this we sailed, along with my mother, to Antharadas. Chapter 25. Journeyings. And when we had come to our lodging, my mother began to ask me of what had become of my father, and I told her that he had gone to seek her and never returned. But she, hearing this, only sighed, for her great joy on my account lightened her other sorrows. And the next day she journeyed with us, sitting with Kepha's wife, and we came to Balanai, where we stayed 3 days, and then we went on to Pathos, and afterwards to Gabala. And so we arrived at Laodike, where Niceta and Aquila met us before the gates, and kissing us, conducted us to a lodging. But Kepha, seeing that it was a large and splendid city, said that it was worthy that we should stay in it 10 days, or even longer. Then Niceta and Aquila asked of me who was this unknown woman, and I answered, "It is my mother, whom Yahweh has given back to me by means of Rabbi Kepha." Chapter 26. Recapitulation. And when I had said this, Kepha began to relate the whole matter to them in order, and said, "When we had come to Aradus, and I had ordered you to go on before us, the same day after you had gone, Clement was led in the course of conversation to tell me of his extraction and his family, and how he had been deprived of his parents, and had had twin brothers older than himself, and that, as his father told him, his mother once saw a vision, by which she was ordered to depart from the city of Rome with her twin sons, else she and they should suddenly perish. And when she had told his father the dream, he, loving his sons with tender affection, and afraid of any evil befalling them, put his wife and sons on board a ship with all necessaries, and sent them to Athens to be educated. Afterwards he sent once and again persons to inquire after them, but nowhere found even a trace of them. At last the father himself went on the search, and until now he was nowhere to be found. When Clement had given me this narrative, there came one of us, asking us to go to the neighboring isle of Aradus, to see vinewood columns of wonderful size. And I consented. And when we came to the place, all the rest went into the interior of the Hekel. But I, for what reason I know not, had no mind to go farther. Chapter 27. Recapitulation continued. But when I was waiting outside for them, I began to notice this woman, and to wonder in what part of her body she was disabled. that she did not seek her living by the labor of her hands, but submitted to the shame of beggary. I therefore asked of her the reason of it. She confessed that she was sprung of a noble race, and was married to a no less noble husband, whose brother, said she, being inflamed by illegitimate love toward me, desired to defile his brother's bed. This I abhorred, and yet dared not to tell my husband of so great an immorality, lest I should stir up war between the brothers and bring disgrace upon the family, and judged it better to depart from my country with my twin sons, leaving the younger boy to be a comfort to his father, and that this might be done with an honorable appearance. I thought good to feign a dream, and to tell my husband that there stood by me in a vision a certain deity, who told me to set out from the city immediately with my twins, and remain until he should instruct me to return. Now she told me that her husband, when he heard this, believed her, and sent her to Athens, with the twin children to be educated there, but that they were driven by a terrible tempest upon that island, where, when the ship had gone to pieces, she was lifted by a wave upon a rock, and delayed killing herself only for this. Until, said she, I could embrace at least the dead limbs of my unfortunate sons, and commit them to burial. But when the day dawned, and crowds had assembled, they took pity on me, and threw a garment over me. But I, miserable, entreated them with many tears, to search if they could find anywhere the bodies of my fallen sons. And I, tearing all my body with my teeth, with wailing and howling, I cried out constantly, "O wretched woman that I am! Where is my Faustus? Where is my Faustus? Where my Faustinus?" Chapter 28, More Recognitions. And when Kepha said this, Niceta and Aquila suddenly started up, and being astonished, began to be greatly agitated, saying, "O Yahweh, you ruler and Elohim of all, are these things true, or are we in a dream?" Then Kepha said, "Unless we be mad, these things are true." But they, after a short pause, and wiping their faces, said, "We are Faustinus and Faustus. And even at the first, when you began this narrative, we immediately fell into a suspicion that the matters that you spoke of might truly relate to us. Yet again, considering that many like things occur in men's lives, we kept silence, although our hearts were struck by some hope. Therefore we waited for the end of your story, that, if it were entirely obvious that it related to us, we might then confess it." And when they had thus spoken, they went in weeping to their mother. And when they found her asleep and wished to embrace her, Kepha prevented them, saying, "Permit me first to prepare your mother's mind, lest it be by the great and sudden joy she lose her reason, and her understanding be disturbed, especially as she is now stupefied with sleep." Chapter 29, Nothing Common or Unclean. Therefore, when our mother had risen from her sleep, Kepha began to address her, saying, "I wish you to know, O woman, an observance of our Torah. We worship one Yahweh who made the world, and we keep his Torah, in which he commands us first of all to worship him and to reverence his name, to honor our parents, and to preserve chastity and uprightness. But this also we observe, not to have a common table with Goyim, unless when they believe, and on the reception of the truth are immersed and consecrated by calling on the blessed name of Yahweh Yeshua, and then we eat with them. Otherwise, even if it were a father or a mother or a wife or sons or brothers, we cannot have a common table with them. Since, therefore, we do this for the special cause of obedience, let it not seem hard to you that your son cannot eat with you until you have the same judgment of the faith that he has. Chapter 30. Who can forbid water? Then she, when she heard this, said, And what hinders me from being immersed today? For even before I saw you, I was wholly alienated from those whom they call Elohim, because they were not able to do anything for me, although I frequently and almost daily sacrificed to them. And as to chastity, what will I say, when neither in former times did pleasures deceive me, nor afterward did poverty compel me to sin? But I think you know well enough how great was my love of chastity when I pretended that dream that I might escape the snares of an unhallowed love, and that I might go abroad with my twins, and when I left this my son Clement alone to be a comfort to his father. For if two were scarcely enough for me, how much more it would have saddened their father if he had had none at all. For he was wretched through his great affection toward our sons, so that even the authority of the dream could scarcely prevail upon him to give up to me Faustinus and Faustus, the brothers of this Clement, and that himself should be content with Clement alone.
The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 7, Chapter 31. Too much joy. And while she was yet speaking, my brothers could contain themselves no longer, but rushed into their mother's embrace with many tears and kissed her. But she said, "What is the meaning of this?" Then said Kepha, "Don't be disturbed, O woman, be firm. These are your sons, Faustinus and Faustus, whom you suppose to have perished in the deep. But how they are alive, and how they escaped in that horrible night, and how the one of them is called Niceta and the other Aquila, they will be able to explain to you themselves, and we also will hear it along with you." And when Kepha had said this, our mother fainted, being overcome with excess of joy. And after some time, being restored and having come to herself, she said, "I beseech you, darling sons, tell me what has befallen you since that dismal and cruel night." Chapter 32. He brings them unto their desired haven. Then Niceta began to say, "On that night, O mother, when the ship was broken up and we were being tossed upon the sea, supported on a fragment of the wreck, certain men whose way was to rob by sea found us and placed us in their boat, and overcoming the power of the waves by rowing, by various stretches, brought us to Caesarea Stratonis. There they starved us, beat us, terrified us, that we might not disclose the truth. And having changed our names, they sold us to a certain widow, a very honorable woman named Justa. She, having bought us, treated us as sons, so that she carefully educated us in Greek literature and liberal arts. And when we grew up, we also attended the philosophic studies, that we might be able to confute the Goyim by supporting the halakha of Yahweh's truth by philosophic disputations. Chapter 33. Another wreck prevented, but we adhered, for friendship's sake and boyish companionship, to one Shimon, a magician, who was educated along with us, so that we were almost deceived by him. For there is mentioned in our teachings of a certain Navi, whose coming was hoped by for all who observe them, through whom immortal and joyful life is promised to be given to those who believe in him. Now we thought that this Shimon was he. But these things will be explained to you, O mother, at a more convenient season. Meanwhile, when we were almost deceived by Shimon, a certain colleague of our master Kepha, a Zakkai by name, warned us that we should not be duped by the magician, but presented us to Kepha on his arrival, that by him we might be taught the things that were sound and perfect. And this we hope will be given to you also, even as Yahweh has granted it to us, that we may be able to eat and have common table with you. Thus, therefore, it was, O mother, that you believed that we were drowned in the sea, while we were stolen by pirates. Chapter 34. Mikvah must be preceded by fasting. When Niceta had spoken this, our mother fell down at Kepha's feet, entreating and beseeching him that both herself and her hostess might be immersed without delay. "That," said she, "I may not even for a single day suffer the loss of the company and society of my sons." In like manner,
we her sons also entreated Kepha, but he said, What? Do you think that I alone am unpitiful, and that I do not wish you to enjoy your mother's society at meals? But she must fast at least 1 day first, and so be immersed. And this because I have heard from her a certain declaration, by which her faith has been revealed to me, and that has given evidence of her belief. Otherwise she must have been instructed and taught many days before she could have been immersed. Chapter 35. Desiring the salvation of others. Then I said, I pray you, my master Kepha, tell us, what is the declaration that you said afforded you evidence of her faith? Then Kepha, it is her asking that her hostess, whose kindnesses she wishes to requite, may be immersed along with her. Now she would not ask that this favor be bestowed upon her whom she loves, unless she believed that there is some great blessing in mikvah. Whence also I find fault with very many who, when they are themselves immersed and believe, yet do nothing worthy of faith with those whom they love, such as wives or children or friends, whom they do not exhort to that which they themselves have attained, as they would do if indeed they believed that ageless life is thereby bestowed. In short, if they see them to be sick or to be subject to any danger bodily, they grieve and mourn, because they are sure that in this destruction threatens them. So then, if they were sure of this, that the punishment of ageless fire awaits those who do not worship Elohim, when would they cease warning and exhorting? Or if they refused, how would they not mourn and bewail them, being sure that ageless torments awaited them? Now therefore, we will send for that woman at once, and see if she loves the faith of our beliefs. And as we find, so we will act. But since your mother has judged so faithfully concerning mikvah, let her fast only 1 day before mikvah. Chapter 36. The son's pleading. But she declared with an oath, in presence of my master Kepha's wife, that from the time she recognized her son, she had been unable to take any food from excess of joy, excepting only that yesterday she drank a cup of water. Kepha's wife also bore witness, saying that it was even so. Then Aquila said,
What hinders her from being immersed?
And Kepha, smiling, said, But this is not the fast of mikvah, for it was not done in order to attain mikvah. Then Nikeda said, But if may be that Elohim, wishing that our mother, on our recognition, should not be separated even for 1 day from participation of our table, preordaining this fast. For as in her ignorance she preserved her chastity, that it might profit her in order to the favor of mikvah, so she fasted before she knew the reason of fasting, that it might profit her in order to be immersed, and that immediately, from the beginning of our acquaintance, she might enjoy communion of the table with us. Chapter 37. Kepha unyielding. Then said Kepha, Let not the immoral one prevail against us, taking occasion from a mother's love, but let you, and me with you, fast this day along with her, and tomorrow she will be immersed. For it's not right that the precepts of truth be relaxed and weakened in favor of any person or friendship. Let us not shrink, then, from suffering along with her, for it is sin to transgress any commandment. But let us teach our bodily senses, which are our outer senses, to be in subjection to our inner senses, and not compel our inner senses, which savor the things that are of Elohim, to follow the outer senses, which savor the things that are of the flesh. For to this end also Yahshua commanded, saying, Whosoever will look upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And to this he added, If thy right eye offends thee, pluck it out, and cast it from you. For it is profitable for you that one of your members perishes, rather than your whole body be cast into the Gehinnom fire. Kepha continues, He does not say, has offended you, that you should then cast away the cause of the sin after you have sinned, but if it offends you, that is, that before you sin you should cut off the cause of the sin that provokes and irritates you. But let none of you think, brothers, that Yahshua recommended the cutting off of the members. His meaning is that the purpose should be cut off, not the members, and the causes that allure to sin, in order that our thought, borne up on the chariot of sight, may push towards the love of Elohim, supported by our bodily senses, and not give loose reins to the eyes of flesh as to wanton horses, eager to turn their running outside the way of the commandments, but may subject the bodily sight to the judgment of the mind, and not suffer those eyes of ours, which Elohim intended to be viewers and witnesses of his work, to become panders of evil desire. And therefore, let the bodily senses as well as the internal thought be subject to Yahweh's Torah, and let them serve his will, whose work they acknowledge themselves to be. Chapter 38, Reward of Chastity. Clement speaking. Therefore, as the order and reason of the mystery demanded, on the following day she was immersed in the sea, and returning to the lodging, was initiated in all the mysteries of truth in their order. And we, her sons, Niceta and Aquila and I, Clement, were present. And after this we dined with her, and glorified Elohim with her, thankfully acknowledging the zeal and teaching of Kepha, who showed us, by the example of our mother, that the good of chastity is not lost with Elohim. As, on the other hand, said he, unchastity does not escape punishment, though it may not be punished immediately, but slowly. But so well-pleasing, said he, is chastity to Elohim, that it confers some favor in the present life, even upon those who are in error. For future blessedness is laid up for those only who preserve chastity and righteousness by the favor of mikvah. In short, that which was befallen your mother is an example of this. For all this welfare has been restored to her in reward of her chastity, for the guarding and preserving of which continence alone is not sufficient. But when anyone perceives that snares and deceptions are being prepared, he must straightway flee as from the violence of fire or the attack of a mad dog, and not trust that he can easily frustrate snares of this kind by philosophizing or humoring them. But as I have said, he must flee and withdraw to a distance, as your mother also did through her true and entire love of chastity. And on this account she has been preserved to you, and you to her. And in addition, she has been endowed with the knowledge of ageless life. So when he had said this, and much more to the same effect, the evening having come, we went to sleep. This is the end of the Nazarene Acts, Book 7. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 8, Chapter 1. The Old Workman. Clement speaking. Now the next morning Kepha took my brothers and me with him, and we went down to the harbor to bathe in the sea. And thereafter we retired to a certain secret place for prayer. But a certain poor old man, a workman, as he appeared by his dress, began to observe us eagerly without our seeing him, that he might see what we were doing in secret. And when he saw us praying, he waited till we came out, and then saluted us and said, If you do not take it amiss and regard me as an inquisitive and importunate person, I should wish to converse with you, for I take pity upon you, and would not have you err under the appearance of truth and be afraid of things that have no existence. For if you think that there is any truth in them, then declare it to me. If therefore you take it patiently, I can in a few words instruct you in what is right. But if it be unpleasant to you, I will go on and do my business. To him Kepha answered, Speak what you think good, and we will gladly hear, whether it be true or false. For you are to be welcomed, because, like a father anxious on behalf of his children, you wish to put us in possession of what you regard as good. Chapter 2, Genesis. Then the old man proceeded to say, I saw you bathe in the sea, and afterwards retire into a secret place. So observing what you were doing without your noticing me, I saw you praying. Therefore, pitying your error, I waited till you came out that I might speak to you, and instruct you not to err in an observance of this sort, because there is neither any Elohim nor any worship, neither is there any providence in the world, but all things are done by fortuitous chance and genesis, as he called it, as I have discovered and most clearly for myself, being accomplished beyond others in the discipline of learning. Do not err, therefore, for whether you pray or whether you do not pray, whatever your genesis contains, that will befall you. Then I, Clement, was affected. I know not how, in my heart recollecting many things in him that seem familiar to me. For someone says well, that what is sprung from anyone, although it may be long absent, yet a spark of relationship is never extinguished. Therefore I begin to ask him who and whence he was, and how descended. But he, not wishing to answer these questions, said, What has that to do with what I have told you? But first, if you please, let us converse of those matters that we have propounded, and afterwards, if circumstances require, we can disclose to one another, as friends to friends, our names, families, and country, and other things connected with these. Yet we all admired the eloquence of the man and the gravity of his manners and the calmness of his speech. Chapter 3. A Friendly Conference. But Kepha, walking along leisurely while conversing, was looking out for a suitable place for a conference. And when he saw a quiet recess near the harbor, he made us sit down. And so he himself first began. Neither did he hold the old man in any contempt, nor did he look down upon him because his dress was poor and mean. Kepha said, therefore, Since you seem to me to be a learned and compassionate man, inasmuch as you have come to us, and wish that to be known to us that you consider to be good, we also wish to expound to you what things we believe to be good and right. And if you do not think them true, you will take in good part our good intentions toward you as we do yours toward us. While Kepha was thus speaking, a great multitude assembled. Then said the old man, Maybe the presence of a multitude disconcerts you. Kepha replied, Not at all, except only on this account that I am afraid lest when the truth is revealed in the course of our discussion, you are ashamed in presence of the multitude to yield and assent to the things that you may have understood to be spoken truly. To this the old man answered, I am not such a fool in my old age that, understanding what is true, I should deny it for the favor of the rabble. Chapter 4. Question stated. Then Kepha began to say, Those who speak the word of truth and who enlighten the spirits of men seem to me to be like the rays of the sun, which when once they have come forth and appeared to the world, can no longer be concealed or hidden, while they are not so much seen by men as they afford sight to all. Therefore it was well said by one of the heralds of the truth, Ye are the light of the world, and a city set upon a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but upon a lampstand, that it may enlighten all who are in the house. But then said the old man, He said well, whoever he is. But let one of you state what, according to his opinion, ought to be followed, that we may direct our speech to a definite aim. For, in order to find the truth, it is not sufficient to overthrow the things that are spoken on the other side, but also that one should himself bring forward what he who is on the other side may oppose. Therefore, in order that both parties may be on an equal footing, it seems to me to be right that each of us should first enunciate what opinion he holds, and if you please, I will begin first. I say, then, that the world is not governed according to the providence of Elohim, because we see that many things in it are done unjustly and disorderly. But I say that it is Genesis that does and regulates all things. Chapter 5. Freedom of Discussion Allowed. When Kepha was about to reply to this, Niketa, anticipating him, said, Would my master Kepha allow me to answer this one, and let it not be thought forward that I, a young man, should have an encounter with an old man, but rather let me converse as a son with a father. Then said the old man, "Not only do I wish, my son, that you should set forth your opinions, but also if any one of your associates, if anyone even of the bystanders, thinks that he knows anything, let him unhesitatingly state it. We will gladly hear it, for it is by the contribution of many that the things that are unknown are more easily found." Then Nicata therefore answered, "Do not deem me to have done rashly, my father, because I have interrupted the speech of my master Kepha, but rather I meant to honor him by doing this. For he is a man of Elohim, full of all knowledge, who is not ignorant even of Greek learning, because he is filled with the Ruach of Elohim, to whom nothing is unknown. But because it is suitable to him to speak of heavenly things, I will answer concerning those things that pertain to the babbling of the Greeks. But after we have disputed in the Grecian manner, and we have come to that point where no issue appears, then he himself, as filled with the knowledge of Elohim, will openly and clearly disclose to us the truth on all matters, so that not we only, but also all who are around us as hearers will learn the way of truth. And therefore now let him sit as umpire, and when either of us will yield, then let him, taking up the matter, give an unquestionable judgment."
Chapter 6. The other side of the question stated. When I had thus spoken, those who had assembled conversed among themselves.
Is this that Kepha of whom we heard is the most approved Talmud of him who appeared in Judea and wrought many signs and miracles?
And they stood gazing upon him with great fear and veneration, as conferring upon Yahweh the honor of his good servant. Which when Kepha observed, he said to them, "Let us hear with all attention, holding an impartial judgment of what will be said by each, and after their encounter we will also add what may seem necessary." And when Kepha had said this, the crowds rejoiced. Then Nicata began to speak as follows. "You have laid down, my father, that the world is not governed by the providence of Elohim, but that all things are subject to genesis, whether the things that relate to the dispositions or those that relate to the doings of everyone. This I could answer immediately, but because it is right to observe order, we also lay down what we hold, as you yourself requested should be done. I say that the world is governed by the providence of Elohim, at least in those things that need his governance. For he it is alone who holds all things in his hand, who made the world, the just Yahweh, who will at some time render to everyone according to his deeds. Now then, you have our position. Go on as you please, either overthrowing mine or establishing your own, that I may meet your statements. Or if you wish me to speak first, I will not hesitate." Chapter 7. The Way Cleared. Then the old man answered, "Whether it pleases you, my son, to speak first, or whether you prefer that I should speak, makes no difference, especially with those who discuss in a friendly spirit. However, speak you first, and I will gladly hear, and I wish you may be able even to follow out those things that are to be spoken by me, and to put in opposition to them those things that are contrary to them, and from the comparison of both to show the truth." Nicata answered, "If you wish it, I can even state your side of the argument, and then answer it." Then the old man, "Show me first how you can know what I have not yet spoken, and so I will believe that you can follow out my side of the argument." Then Nicata, "Your sect is obvious, even by the proposition that you have laid down to those who are skilled in doctrines of this sort, and its consequence is certain. And because I am not ignorant of what the propositions of the philosophers are, I know what follows from those things that you have propounded, especially because I have frequented the schools of Epicurus in preference to the other philosophers. But my brother Aquila has attended more to the Pyrrhonists.
and our other brother to the Platonists and Aristotelians. Therefore you have to do with learned hearers." Then said the old man, "You have well and logically informed us how you perceive the things that followed from the statements that have been enunciated. But I professed something more than the tenets of Epicurus, for I introduced the Genesis, and asserted that it is the cause of all the doings of men." When the old man had said this, I, Clement, said to him, "Hear, my father, if my brother Niketa brings you to acknowledgment that the world is not governed without the providence of Elohim, I will be able to answer you in that part that remains concerning the Genesis, for I am well acquainted with this doctrine." And when I had thus spoken, my brother Aquila said, "What is our use of calling him father, when we are commanded to call no man father upon earth?" Then looking to the old man, he said, "Do not take it amiss, my father, that I have found fault with my brother for calling you father, for we have precept not to call anyone by that name." When Aquila said that, all the assembly of the bystanders, as well as the old man and Kepha, laughed. And when Aquila asked the reason of all their laughing, I said to him, "Because you yourself do the very thing that you find fault with in another. For you called the old man father." But he denied it, saying, "I am not aware that I called him father." Meanwhile, Kepha was moved with certain suspicions, as he told us afterwards. And looking to Niketa, he said, "Go on with what you have proposed." Chapter 9, Simple and Compound. Then Niketa began as follows. "Everything that is either simple or compound. That which is simple is without number, division, color, difference, roughness, smoothness, weight, lightness, quality, quantity, and therefore without end. But that which is compound is either compounded of 2, or of 3, or of even 4 elements, or at all events of several. And things that are compounded can also of necessity be divided." The old man, hearing this, said, "You speak most excellently and learnedly, my son." Then Niketa went on, "Therefore, that which is simple, and which is without any of those things by which that which, and without any of those things, by which that which subsists can be dissolved, is without doubt incomprehensible and infinite, knowing neither beginning or end, and therefore is one and alone and subsisting without an author. But that which is compound is subject to number, and diversity and division are necessarily compounded by some author, and is a diversity collected into one species. That which is infinite is therefore in respect of goodness a father, in respect of power a creator. Neither can the power of creating cease in the infinite, nor the goodness be quiescent, but he is impelled by goodness to change existing things, and by power to arrange and strengthen them. Therefore, some things, as we have said, are changed, and composed of 3 or 2, some of 4, others of more elements. But since our inquiry at present is concerning the method of the world and its substance, which, it is agreed, is compounded of 4 elements, to which all those 10 differences belong, which we have mentioned above, let us begin at these lower steps and come to the higher. For a way is afforded us to intellectual and invisible things from those that we see and handle, as is contained in arithmetical instructions, where, when inquiry is made concerning divine things, we rise from the lower to the higher numbers. But when the method respecting present and visible things is expounded, the order is directed from the higher to the lower numbers. Is it not so?"
Kepha quietly said, "Oh, brother."
All in the crowd were scratching their heads. What? Chapter 10, Creation Implies Providence. Then the old man said, You are following it out exceedingly well. Then Nikeda. Now then, we must inquire concerning the method of the world, of which the first inquiry is divided into two parts. For it is asked whether it has been made or not. And if it has not been made, itself must be that unbegotten from which all things are. But if it has been made, concerning this again the question is divided into two parts, whether it was made by itself or by another. And if indeed it was made by itself, then without doubt providence is excluded. If providence is not admitted, in vain is the mind incited to virtue. In vain justice is maintained, if there be no one to render to the just man according to his merits. But even the spirit itself will not appear to be immortal, if there be no dispensation of providence to receive it after its escape from the body. The people in the crowd muttered to themselves, scratched their heads, and said, The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 8, Chapter 11. General or Special Providence. Nikeda speaking. Now, if it be taught that there is providence, and that the world was made by it, other questions meet us that must be discussed. For it will be asked in what way providence acts, whether generally towards the whole, or especially toward the parts, or generally also towards the parts, or both generally towards the whole, and especially towards the parts. But by general providence we mean this, as if Elohim, at first making the world, has given an order and appointed a course to things, and has ceased to take any further care of what is done. But special providence towards the parts is of this sort, that he exercises providence over some men or places, but not over others, but general over all, and at the same time special over the parts, is in this wise. If Elohim made all things at first, and exercises providence over each individual even to the end, and renders to everyone according to his deeds. Chapter 12. Prayer inconsistent with Genesis. Therefore, that first proposition, which declares that Elohim made all things in the beginning, and having imposed a course and order upon things, takes no further account of them, affirms that all things are done according to what you call Genesis. To this, therefore, we will first reply, and especially to those who worship the false Elohim and defend Genesis. Assuredly, these men, when they sacrifice to the false Elohim and pray to them, hope that they will obtain something in opposition to Genesis, and so they annul Genesis. But when they laugh at those who incite to virtue and exhort to continence, and say that nobody can do or suffer anything unless what is decreed to him by fate, they assuredly cut up by the roots all worship of any Elohim. For why should you worship those from whom you can obtain nothing, that the method of what is decreed does not allow? Let this suffice in the meantime, in opposition to these men. But I say that the world is made by the true Elohim, and that it is at some time to be destroyed by him, and that that world may appear that is ageless, and that is made for this end, that it may be always, and that it may receive those who, in the judgment of Elohim, are worthy of it. But that there is another and invisible world, which contains this visible world within itself. After we have finished our discussion concerning the visible world, we will come to it also. Chapter 13. A Creator Necessary. Now, in the meantime, that this visible world has been made, very wise men among the philosophers do testify, and that we may not seem to make use of assertions as witnesses, as though we needed them, let us inquire, if you please, concerning its principles. That this visible world is material is sufficiently evident from the fact that it is visible. But everybody receives one of two differentiae, for it is either compact and solid, or divided and separate. And if the body of which the world was made was compact and solid, and that body was parted and divided through diverse species and parts according to its differences, there must necessarily be understood to have been someone to separate the body that was compact and solid, and to draw it into many parts and diverse forms. Or if all this mass of the world was compounded and compacted from diverse and dispersed parts of bodies, still there must be understood to have been someone to collect into one the dispersed parts, and to invest these things with their different species. Chapter 14, Mode of Creation. And indeed, I know that several of the philosophers were rather of the opinion that Elohim the Creator made divisions and distinctions from one body, which they call matter, which yet consisted of four elements, mingled into one by a certain tempering of Elohim, for I think that what some have said is vain, that the body of the world is simple, that is, without any conjunction, since it is evident that what is simple can neither be a body, nor can be mixed, or propagated, or dissolved, all of which we see the bodies of the world do. For how could it be dissolved if it were simple, and had not within it that from which it might be resolved and divided? But if bodies seem to be composed of 2 or 3, or even of 4 elements, who that has even a small portion of sense does not perceive that there must have been someone who collected several into one, and preserving the measure of tempering, made a solid body out of diverse parts? This someone, therefore, we call Yahweh, the Creator of the world, and acknowledge him as the author of the universe. Chapter 15, Theories of Creation. For the Greek philosophers, inquiring into the beginnings of the world, have gone some in one way and some in another. In short, Pythagoras says that numbers are the elements of its beginnings. Callistratus says qualities. Alcmaeon, contrarieties. Anaximander, immensity. Anaxagoras, equalities of parts. Epicurus, atoms. Diodorus, akatonomaston, or anomaly, that is, things in which there are no parts. Asclepius, ogikoi, which we may call tumors or swellings. The geometricians, ends. Democritus, ideas. Thales, water. Heraclitus, fire. Diogenes, air. Parmenides, earth. Zeno, Empedocles. And Plato, fire, water, air, and earth. Aristotle also introduces a fifth element, which he called akatonomaston, that is, that which cannot be named, without doubt indicating Elohim who made the world by joining the 4 elements into one, whether therefore there be 2 or 3 or 4 or more, or innumerable elements of which the world consists. In every supposition there is shown to be an Elohim who collected many into one, and again drew them when collected into diverse species. And by this it is proved that the machine of the world could not have subsisted without a maker and a disposer. Wow! Chapter 16, the world made of what we cannot see by a creator, but from the fact that, in the conjunction of the elements, if one be deficient or in excess, the others are loosened and fall, is shown that they took their beginning from that which is invisible. If, for example, moisture be wanting in any body, neither will the dry sand, for dry is fed by moisture, as also cold by heat, in which, as we have said, if one be defective, the whole is dissolved. And in this they give indications of their origin, that they were made out of the invisible. Now, if matter itself is proved to have been made, how will its parts and its species, of which the world consists, is thought to be unmade? But about matter and its qualities, this is not the time to speak. Only let it suffice to have taught this, that Yahweh is the creator of all things, because neither, if the body of which the world consists was solid and united, could it be separated and distinguished without a creator. Nor, if it was collected into one from diverse and separate parts, could it be collected and mixed without a maker. Therefore, if Yahweh is so clearly shown to be the creator of the world, what room is there for Epicurus to introduce atoms, and to assert that not only sensible bodies, but even intellectual and rational minds are made of insensible corpuscles? Chapter 17. Doctrine of Atoms Untenable. But you will say, according to the opinion of Epicurus, that successions of atoms coming in a ceaseless course and mixing with one another, and conglomerating through unlimited and endless periods of time, are made solid bodies. I do not treat this opinion as a pure fiction, and that too a badly contrived one, but let us examine it, whatever is its character, and see if what is said can stand. For they say that those corpuscles, which they call atoms, are of different qualities, that some are moist, and therefore heavy, and tending downwards, and others dry and earthy, and therefore still heavy, but others fiery, and therefore always pushing upwards. Others cold and inert, always remaining in the middle. Since then some, as being fiery, always tend upwards, and others, as being moist and dry, always downwards, and others keep a middle and unequal course, how could they meet together and form one body? For if any one threw down from a height small pieces of straw, for example, and pieces of lead of the same size, will the light straws be able to keep up with the pieces of lead, though they be equal in size? Nay, the heavier reach the bottom far more quickly. But Kifao whispered under his breath, "Air resistance." So also atoms, though they be equal in size, yet being unequal in weight, the lighter will never be able to keep pace with the heavier, but if they cannot keep pace, certainly neither can they be mixed or form one body. Chapter 18. The concourse of atoms could not make the world. Then, in the next place, if they are ceaselessly borne about and always coming, and being added to things whose measure is already complete, how can the universe stand, when new weights are always being heaped upon so vast weights? And this also I ask, if this expanse of sky that we say was constructed by the gradual concurrence of atoms, how did it not collapse when it was in construction, if indeed the yawning top of the structure was not propped and bound by any stays? For as those who would build circular domes, unless they bind the fastening of the central top, the whole falls at once. So also the circle of the world, which we see to be brought together in so favorable a form, if it was not made at once and under the influence of a single putting forth of divine energy by the power of a creator, but atoms by gradually concurring and constructing it, not as reason demanded, but as a fortuitous issue befell, how did it not fall down and crumble to pieces before it could be brought together and fastened? And further, I ask this: what is the pavement on which the foundations of such an immense mass are laid? And again, what you call the pavement, on what does it rest? And again, the other, what supports it? And so I go on asking until the answer comes to nothing and a vacuity. Chapter 19, More Difficulties of the Atomic Theory. But if anyone say that atoms of a fiery quality, being joined together, form the body, and because the quality of fire does not tend downwards but upwards, that the nature of fire, always pushing upwards, supports the mass of the world placed upon it, to this we answer: how could atoms of a fiery quality, which always make for the highest place, descend to the lower, and be found in the lowest place of all, so as to form a foundation for all? Whereas rather the heavier qualities, that is, the earthy or watery, always come before the lighter, as we have said. Hence also they assert that the sky, as the higher structure, is composed of fiery atoms, which are lighter, and always fly upward. Therefore the world cannot have foundations of fire or any other, nor can there be any association or compacting of the heavier atoms with the lighter, that is, of those that are always borne downwards with those that always fly upwards. Thus it is sufficiently shown that the bodies of this world are consolidated by the union of atoms, and that insensible bodies, even if they could by any means concur and be united, could not give forms and measures to body, form limbs, or affect qualities, or express quantities, all which, therefore, by their exactness, attest the hand of a maker, and show the operation of reason, which reason I call the Word and Yahweh. Chapter 20, Plato's Testimony. But someone will say that these things are done by nature. Now in this, the controversy is about a name. For while it is evident that it is a work of mind and reason, what you call nature, I call Yahweh the Creator. It is evident that neither the species of bodies, arranged with so necessary distinctions, nor the faculties of minds, could or can be made by irrational and senseless work. But if you regard the philosophers as fit witnesses, Plato testifies concerning these things in the Timaeus, where, in a discussion on the making of the world, he asks whether it has existed always, or had a beginning, and decides that it was made. For, says he, it is visible and palpable and corporeal. But it is evident that all things which are of this sort have been made. But what has been made has doubtless an author, by whom it was made. This maker and father of all, however, it is difficult to discover, and when discovered, it is impossible to declare him to the vulgar. Such is the declaration of Plato. But though he and the other Greek philosophers had chosen to be silent about the making of the world, would it not be quite clear to all who have any understanding? For what man is there having even a particle of sense, who, when he sees a house having all things necessary for useful purposes, its roof fashioned into the form of a globe, painted with various splendor and diverse figures, adorned with large and splendid lights, who is there, I say, that, seeing such a structure, would not immediately pronounce that it was constructed by a most wise and powerful artificer? And so, who can be found so foolish as, when he gazes upon the fabric of the sky, perceives the splendor of the sun and moon, sees the courses and beauty of the stars, and their paths assigned to them by fixed laws and periods, will not cry out that these things are made, not so much by a wise and rational artificer, as by wisdom and reason itself? Wow. Book 8, Chapter 21, Mechanical Theory. Niketa continues. But if you would rather have the opinions of other Greek philosophers, and you are acquainted with mechanical science, you are of course familiar with what is their deliverance concerning the skies, for they suppose a sphere equally rounded in every direction, and looking indifferently to all points, and at equal distances in all directions from the center of the earth, and so stable by its own symmetry, and that its perfect equality does not permit it to fall off to any side, and so the sphere is sustained, although supported by no prop. Now, if the fabric of the world really has this form, the divine work is evident in it. But if, as others think, the sphere is placed upon the waters, and is supported by them, or floating in them, even so the work of a great contriver is shown in it. Chapter 22, Motions of the Stars. But lest the assertion may seem doubtful respecting things that are not obvious to all, let us come to those things of which nobody is ignorant, who disposed the courses of the stars with so great reason, ordained their risings and settings, and appointed to each one to accomplish the circuit of the skies in certain and regular times, who assigned to some to be always approaching to the setting, and others to be returning to the rising, who put a measure upon the courses of the sun, that he might mark out by his diverse motions hours and days and months, and changes of season, or that he might distinguish by the sure measure of his course, now winter, then spring, summer, and afterwards autumn, and always, by the same changes of the year, complete the circle with variety, without confusion. Who, I say, will not pronounce that the director of such order is the very wisdom of Yahweh. And these things we have spoken according to the relations given us by the Greeks respecting the science of the heavenly bodies. Chapter 23, Providence in Earthly Things. But what will we say of those things also that we see on the earth or in the sea? Are we not plainly taught that not only the works but also the providence of Elohim is in them? For whereas there are on the earth lofty mountains in certain places, their purpose is that the air, being compressed and confined by them through the appointment of Elohim, may be forced and pressed out into winds, by which fruits may germinate, and the summer heat may be moderated when the Pleiades glow, fired from the blaze of the sun. But you will say, why that blaze of the sun, that moderating should be required? How then should fruits be ripened that are necessary for the uses of men? But observe this also, that at the meridian axis, where the heat is greatest, there is no great collection of clouds, nor an abundant fall of rain, lest disease should be produced among the inhabitants. For watery clouds, if they are acted on by rapid heat, render the air impure and pestilential. And the earth also, receiving the warm rain, does not afford nourishment to the crops, but destruction. In this, who can doubt that there is the working of Yahweh? In short, Mitzrayim, which is scorched with the heat of Ethiopia in its neighborhood, lest its air should be incurably corrupted by the effects of showers. Its plains do not receive rain furnished to them from the clouds, but, as it were, an earthly shower from the overflow of the Nile. Chapter 24, Rivers and Seas. What will we say of fountains and rivers, which flow with perpetual motion into the sea? And by Yahweh's power neither does their abundant supply fail, nor does the sea, though it receives so great quantities of water, experience any increase. But both those elements that contribute to it and those that are thus contributed remain in the same proportion. But you will say to me, the salt water naturally consumes the fresh water that is poured into it. Well, in this is revealed the work of providence, that it made the element salt, into which it turned the courses of all the waters that it had provided for the use of men, so that through so great spaces of time the channel of the sea has not been filled, though it once produced a deluge destructive to the earth and to men. Nor will any one be so foolish as to think that this so great reason and so great providence has been arranged by irrational nature. Chapter 25, Plants and Animals. Editor's note. There are a few ideas in this chapter that don't even seem to make sense among those that we see as right. As one editor has pointed out, however, the following notions were commonly believed true, not unlike the philosophies of Charles Darwin, taken as scientific fact today. Kifa's science is, at least, not rooted in denial of the existence of a creator, as Darwinism is, and they are anomalies among all the other pronouncements made in these chapters concerning the workings of creation. Before we condemn these ideas, we should consider that Yahweh no doubt also finds that some of our perceptions about him and his creation are, to say the least, inaccurate, yet extends his mercy and graciousness to us all. Consider Saul's admonition to the Greeks, found in Acts 17:30 and 31, and at the times of this ignorance El winked. Note also Epistle of Barnabas 10, in which the common beliefs about the natures and habits of certain animals do not seem to mirror modern zoology, yet are used to make certain moral or spiritual points. Reference Epistle of Barnabas 10:6, and I quote, "For the rabbit grows an orifice in the body each year," unquote. End of editor's note. Niketa continues, "But what will I say of plants, and what of animals? Is it not Providence that has ordained that plants, when they decay by old age, should be reproduced by the suckers or the seeds that they have themselves produced, and animals by propagation? And by a certain wonderful dispensation of providence, milk is prepared in the udders of the dams for the animals before they are born, and as soon as they are born, with no one to guide them, they seek out the store of nourishment provided for them. And not only males are produced, but females also, that by means of both the race may be perpetuated. But lest this should seem, as some think, to be done by a certain order of nature, and not by the appointment of the Creator, he has, as a proof, an indication of his providence, ordained a few animals to preserve their stock on the earth in an exceptional way. For example, the crow conceives through the mouth, and the weasel brings forth through the ear, and some birds, such as hens, sometimes produce eggs conceived of wind or dust. Other animals convert the male into the female, and change their sex every year, as hares and hyenas, which they call monsters." Others spring from the earth and get their bodies from it as moles, others from ashes as vipers, others from putrefying flesh as wasps from horse flesh, bees from ox flesh, others from cow dung as beetles, others from herbs as the scorpion from the basil, and again herbs from animals as parsley and asparagus from the horn of the stag or the she-goat. Chapter 26, Germination of Seeds. And what occasion is there to mention more instances in which Yahweh has ordained the production of animals to be effected in various ways, that order being superseded that is thought to be assigned by nature, from which not an irrational course of things, but one arranged by his own reason might be evinced. And in this also is there not a full work of providence shown, when seeds sown are prepared by means of earth and water for the sustenance of men. For when these seeds are committed to the earth, the soil milks upon the seeds, as from its teats, the moisture that it has received into itself by the will of Elohim. For there is in water a certain power of the Ruach, given by Elohim from the beginning, by whose operation the structure of the body that is to be begins to be formed in the seed itself, and to be developed by means of the blade and the ear. For the grain of seed being swelled by the moisture, that power of the Ruach that has been made to reside in water, running as an incorporeal substance through certain narrow passages of veins, excites the seeds to growth, and forms the species of the growing plants. By means, therefore, of the moist element in which that vital Ruach is contained and inborn, it is caused that not only is it revived, but also that an appearance and form in all respects like to the seeds that had been sown is reproduced. Now, who that has even a particle of sense will think that this method depends upon irrational nature and not upon divine wisdom? Lastly, also these things are done in a resemblance of the birth of men. For the earth seems to take the place of the womb, into which the seed, being cast, is both formed and nourished by the power of water and Ruach, as we have said before. Chapter 27, Power of Water. But in this also Yahweh is to be admired, that he permits us to see and know the things that are made, but has placed in secrecy and concealment the way and manner in which they are done, that they may not be competent to the knowledge of the unworthy, but may be laid open to the worthy and faithful when they will have deserved it. But to prove by facts and examples that nothing is imparted to seeds of the substance of the earth, but that all depends upon the element of water and the power of the Ruach that is in it. Suppose, for example, that 100 talents weight of earth are placed in a very large trough, and that there are sown in it several kinds of seeds, either of herbs or of shrubs, and that water enough is supplied for watering them, and that care is taken for several years, and that the seeds that are gathered are stored up, for example, of corn or barley, and other sorts separately from year to year until the seeds of each sort amount to 100 talents weight. Then also let the stalks be pulled up by the roots and weighed. And after all these have been taken from the trough, let the earth be weighed. It will still give back its 100 talents weight undiminished. Whence, then, will we say that all that weight and all the quantity of different seeds and stalks has come? does it not appear without doubt that it has come from the water? For the earth retains entirely what is its own, but the water that has been poured in all through it is nowhere, on account of the powerful virtue of the divine condition, which by the one species of water both prepares the substances of so many seeds and shrubs, and forms their species, and preserves the kind, while multiplying the increase. Chapter 28, The Human Body. From all these things, I think it is sufficient and abundantly evident that all things are produced, and the universe consists by a designing sense, and not by the irrational operation of nature. But let us come now, if you please, to our own substance, that is, the substance of man, who is a small world, a microcosm in the great world, and let us consider with what reason it is compounded. And from this especially you will understand the wisdom of the Creator. For although man consists of different substances, one mortal and the other immortal, yet by the skillful contrivance of the Creator, their diversity does not prevent their union, and that although the substances be diverse and alien the one from the other, for the one is taken from the earth and formed by the Creator, but the other is given from immortal substances. And yet the honor of its immortality is not violated by this union, nor does it as something consist of reason, desire, and passion, but rather such affections seem to be in it by which it may be moved in each of these directions. For the body, which consists of bones and flesh, takes its beginning from the seed of a man, which is extracted from the marrow by warmth, and conveyed into the womb as into a soil to which it adheres, and is gradually moistened from the fountain of the blood, and so is changed into flesh and bones, and is formed into the likeness of him who injected the seed. Chapter 29, Symmetry of the Body. And mark in this the work of the designer, how he has inserted the bones like pillars, on which the flesh might be sustained and carried. Then again, how an equal measure is preserved on either side, that is, the right and the left, so that foot answers to foot, hand to hand, and even finger to finger, so that each agrees in perfect equality with each, and also eye to eye, and ear to ear, which not only are suitable to and matched with each other, but also are formed fit for necessary uses. The hands, for instance, are so made as to be fit for work, the feet for walking, the eyes protected with sentinel eyebrows to serve the purpose of sight, the ears so formed for hearing that, like a cymbal, they vibrate the sound of the word that falls upon them and sends it inward, and transmits even in the understanding of the heart, whereas the tongue, striking against the teeth in speaking, performs the part of a fiddle bow. The teeth also are formed, some for cutting and dividing the food, and handing it over to the inner ones, and these, in their turn, bruise and grind it like a mill, that it may be more conveniently digested when it is conveyed into the stomach. For this reason they are also called grinders. Chapter 30, Breath and Blood. The nostrils are also made for the purpose of collecting, inspiring, and expiring air, that by the renewal of the breath, the natural heat that is in the heart may, by means of the lungs, be either warmed or cooled, as the occasion may require, while the lungs are made to abide in the breast, that by their softness they may soothe and cherish the vigor of the heart, in which the life seems to abide. The life, I say, not the spirit. And what will I say of the substance of the blood, which, proceeding as a river from a fountain, and first borne along in one channel, and then spreading through innumerable veins as through canals, irrigates the whole territory of the human body with vital streams, being supplied by the agency of the liver, which is placed in the right side, for effecting the digestion of food and turning it into blood, but in the left side is placed the spleen, which draws to itself, and in some way cleanses the impurities of the blood. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 8, Chapter 31, The Intestines. Niceta speaking. What reason also is employed in the intestines, which are arranged in long circular windings that they may gradually carry off the refuse of the food, so as neither to render places suddenly empty, and so as not to be hindered by the food that is taken afterward, but they are made like a membrane, that the parts that are outside of them may gradually receive moisture, which, if it were poured out, suddenly would empty the internal parts, and not hindered by a thick skin, which would render the outside dry, and disturb the whole fabric of man with distressing thirst. Chapter 32, Generation. Moreover, there is the wonder of the female form, and the captivity of the womb, which is most suitable for receiving and cherishing and vivifying the germ. Who does not believe that it has been made as it is by reason and foresight? Because in that part alone of her body, the female differs from the male, in which the fetus being placed is kept and cherished. And again, the male differs from the female only in that part of his body in which is the power of injecting seed and propagating mankind. And in this there is a great proof of providence from the necessary difference of members. How marvelous it is that where, under a likeness of form, there is found to be diversity of use and variety of office. For males and females equally have teats, but only those of the female are filled with milk, that, as soon as they have brought forth, the infant may find nourishment suited to him. But if we see the members in man arranged with such method, and that in all the rest of creation there is seen to be similarity of form, and difference only in those in which their use requires a difference, and we neither see anything superfluous nor anything wanting in man, nor in woman anything deficient or in excess, who will not, from all these things, acknowledge the operation of reason and the wisdom of the Creator? Chapter 33, Correspondences in Creation. With this agrees also the reasonable difference of other animals, and each one being suited to its own use and service. This also is testified by the variety of trees and the diversity of herbs, varying both in form and in juices. This also is asserted by the change of seasons, distinguished into 4 periods, and the circle closing the year with certain hours, days, months, and not deviating from the appointed reckoning by a single hour. Hence, in short, the age of the world itself is reckoned by a certain and fixed account, and a definite number of years. Chapter 34, Time of Making the World. But you will say, when was the world made, and why so late? This you might have objected, though it had been made sooner. For you might say, why not also before this? And so, going back through unmeasured ages, you might still ask, and why not sooner? But whether it was made at all. For if it is obvious that it was made, it is necessarily the work of a powerful and supreme Creator. And if this is evident, it must be left to the choice and judgment of that all-knowing Creator when he should please to make it. unless indeed you think that all this wisdom, which has constructed the immense fabric of the world, and has given to the several objects their forms and kinds, assigning to them a habit not only in accordance with beauty, but also most convenient and necessary for their future uses, unless, I say, you think that this alone has escaped it, that it should choose a convenient season for so magnificent a work of creation. Yes, doubtless a certain reason and evident cause why and when and how he made the world. But it were not proper that these should be disclosed to those who are reluctant to inquire into and understand the things that are placed right before their eyes, and that testify of his providence. For those things that are kept in secret and are hidden within the senses of Chokmah, as in a royal treasury, are laid open to none but those who have learned of him, with whom these things are sealed and laid up. It is Yahweh Elohim, therefore, who made all things, and himself was made by none. But those who speak of nature instead of Elohim, and declare that all things were made by nature, do not perceive the mistake of the name that they use. For if they think that nature is irrational, it is most foolish to suppose that a rational creature can proceed from an irrational creator. But if it is reason, that is, logos, by devar, by which it appears that all things were made, they change the name without purpose when they make statements concerning the reason of the Creator. If you have anything to say to these things, my father, say on. Chapter 35, A Contest of Hospitality. When Nikeda had thus spoken, the old man answered, You indeed, my son, have conducted your argument wisely and vigorously, so much so that I do not think the subject of providence could be better treated. But as it is now late, I wish to say some things tomorrow in answer to what you have argued. And if on these you can satisfy me, I will confess myself a debtor to your favor. And when the old man had said this, Kepha rose up. Then one of those present, a chief man of the Laodiceans, requested of Kepha and us that he might give the old man other clothes instead of the mean and torn ones that he wore. Kepha and we embraced this man, praising him for his honorable and excellent intention, and Kepha said, We are not so foolish and disrespectful as not to bestow the things that are necessary for bodily uses upon him to whom we have committed so precious words. And we hope that he will willingly receive them as a father from his sons. And also we trust that he will share with us our house and our living. While we said this, and that chief man of the city strove to take the old man away from us with the greatest urgency and with many blandishments, while we the more eagerly strove to keep him with us, all the people cried out that it should rather be done as the old man himself pleased. And when silence was obtained, the old man with an oath said, Today I will stay with no one, nor take anything from anyone, lest the choice of the one should prove the sorrow of the other. Afterwards these things may be, if so it seem right. Chapter 36, Arrangements for Tomorrow. And when the old man had said this, Kepha said to the chief man of the city, Since you have shown your good will in our presence, it is not right that you should go away sorrowful, but we will accept from you favor for favor. Show us your house, and make it ready, so that the discussion that is to be tomorrow may be held there, and that anyone who wished to be present to hear it may be admitted. Now when the chief man of the city heard this, he rejoiced greatly, and all the people also heard it gladly. And when the crowds had dispersed, he pointed out his house. And the old man also was preparing to depart, but I commanded one of my attendants to follow the old man secretly, and find out where he stayed. And when we returned to our lodging, we told our brothers all our dealings with the old man, and so, as usual, we supped and went to sleep. Chapter 37, The Form of Sound Words. From me. On the following day Kepha rose early and called us, and we went together to the secret place in which we had been on the previous day for the purpose of prayer. And when, after prayer, we were coming from there to the appointed place, he exhorted us by the way, saying, "Hear me, most beloved fellow servants. It's good that every one of you, according to his ability, contribute to the advantage of those who are approaching to the faith of our way. And therefore, do not shrink from instructing the ignorant and teaching according to the wisdom that has been bestowed upon you by the providence of Elohim. Yet so that you only join the eloquence of your discourse with those things that you have heard from me, and that have been committed to you, yet do it so that you only join the eloquence of your discourse with those things that you have heard from me, and that have been committed to you. But do not speak anything that is your own, and that has not been committed to you, though it may seem yourselves to be true, but hold forth those things as I have said, that I myself have received from the Navi Emet Yeshua, and have delivered to you, although they may seem to be less full of authority. For thus men often do who turn away from the truth, while they believe that they have found out, by their own thoughts, a form of truth more true and powerful." Chapter 38, The Chief Man's House. To these counsels of Kepha we willingly assented, saying to him that we should do nothing but what was pleasing to him. Then said he, "That you may be therefore exercised without danger, each of you conduct the discussion in my presence, one succeeding another, and each one clearly explaining his own questions. Now then, as Nicada discoursed sufficiently yesterday, let Aquila conduct the discussion today, and after Aquila, Clement, and then I, if the case will require it, will add something." Meanwhile, while we were talking in this way, we came to the house, and the master of the house welcomed us, and led us to a certain apartment, arranged after the manner of a theater, and beautifully built. There we found great crowds waiting for us who had come during the night, and amongst them the old man who had argued with us yesterday. Therefore we entered, having Kepha in the midst of us, looking about if we could see the old man anywhere. And when Kepha saw him hiding in the midst of the crowd, he called to him, saying, "Since you possess a spirit more enlightened than most, why do you hide and conceal yourself in modesty? Rather, come here and set forth your sentiments." Chapter 39, Recapitulation of yesterday's argument. And when Kepha had thus spoken, immediately the crowd began to make room for the old man. And when he had come forward, he thus began, "Although I do not remember the words of the discourse that the young man delivered yesterday, yet I remember the general meaning and the order of it, and therefore I think it necessary, for the sake of those who were not present yesterday, to call up what was said, and to repeat everything shortly, that although something may have escaped me, I may be reminded of it by him who delivered the discourse, who is now present." This, then, was the gist of yesterday's discussion, that all things that we see, inasmuch as they consist in a certain proportion, and art, and form, and species, must be believed to have been made by intelligent power. But if it be mind and reason that has formed them, it follows that the world is governed by the providence of the same reason, although the things that are done in the world may seem to us to be not quite rightly done. But it follows that if Elohim and mind is the creator of all things, he must also be just. But if he is just, he necessarily judges. If he judges, it is of necessity that men be judged with respect to their doings, and if everyone is judged in respect to his doings, there will at some time be a righteous separation between Tzaddikim and Kataim, between the righteous and sinners. And this, I think, was the substance of the whole discourse, no? Chapter 40, Genesis. If therefore it can be shown that mind and reason created all things, it follows that those things that come after are also managed by reason and providence. But if unintelligent and blind nature produces all things, the reason of judgment is undoubtedly overthrown, and there is no ground to expect either punishment of sin or reward of well-doing where there is no judge. Since then the whole matter depends upon this, and hangs by this head, do not take it amiss if I wish that to be discussed and handled somewhat more fully. For in this, the first gate, as it were, is shut toward all things that have been put before us, and therefore I wish first of all to have it opened to me. Now therefore hear what my doctrine is, and if any one of you pleases, let him reply to me, for I will not be ashamed to learn if I hear that which is true, and to assent to him who speaks rightly. The discourse, then, which you delivered yesterday, which asserted that all things consist by art and measure and reason, does not fully persuade me that it is mind and reason that has made the world, for I have many things that I can show to consist by competent measure and form and species, and that yet were not made by mind and reason. Then besides, I see that many things are done in the world without arrangement, consequence, or justice, and that nothing can be done without the course of genesis. This I will in the sequel prove most clearly from my own case.
The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 8, Chapter 40, Genesis, the old man speaking.
If, therefore, it can be shown that mind and reason created all things, it follows that those things that come after are also managed by reason and providence. But if unintelligent and blind nature produces all things, the reason of judgment is undoubtedly overthrown, and there is no ground to expect either punishment of sin or reward of well-doing where there is no judge. Since, then, the whole matter depends upon this, and hangs by this head, do not take it amiss if I wish this to be discussed and handled somewhat more fully. For in this, the first gate, as it were, is shut toward all things that have been put before us, and therefore I wish first of all to have it opened to me. Now, therefore, hear what my doctrine is, and if any one of you pleases, let him reply to me, for I will not be ashamed to learn. If I hear that which is true, and to assent to him who speaks rightly. The discourse, then, which you delivered yesterday, which asserted that all things consist by art and measure and reason, does not fully persuade me that it is mind and reason that has made the world, for I have many things that I can show to consist by competent measure and form and species, and that yet were not made by mind and reason. Then, besides, I see that many things are done in the world without arrangement, consequence, or justice, and that nothing can be done without the course of genesis. This I will in the sequel prove most clearly from my own case.
Chapter 41, The Rainbow. When the old man had thus spoken, Aquila answered, As you yourself proposed that anyone who pleased should have an opportunity of answering to what you might say, my brother Niceta permits me to conduct the argument today. Then the old man,
Go on, my son, as you please.
And Aquila answered,
You promised that you would show that there are many things in the world that have a form and species arranged by equal reason, and yet it is evident were not affected by Elohim as their creator. Now then, as you have promised, point out these things. Then said the old man, Behold, we see how the bow in the heaven assume a circular shape, completed in all proportion, and have an appearance of reality which in all probability neither mind could have constructed nor reason described, and yet it is not made by any human mind. Behold, I have set forth the whole in a word. Now answer me. Chapter 42, Types and Forms. Then said Aquila, If anything is expressed from a type and form, it is at once understood that it is from reason, and that it could not be made without mind, since the type itself, which expresses figures and forms, was not made without mind. For example, if wax be applied to an engraved ring, it takes the stamp and figure from the ring, which undoubtedly is without sense, but then the ring which expresses the figure was engraved by the hand of a workman, and it was mind and reason that gave the type to this ring. So then the rainbow also is expressed in the air. For the sun, impressing its rays on the clouds in the process of disbursement, and affixing the type of its circularity to the cloudy moisture, as it were to soft wax, produces the appearance of a bow. And this, as I have said, is effected by the reflection of the sun's brightness upon the clouds, and reproducing the brightness of its circle from them. Now, this does not always take place, but only when the opportunity is presented by the disbursement of moistened clouds, and consequently, when the clouds again are condensed and unite, the form of the bow is dissolved and vanishes. Finally, the bow never is seen without sun and clouds, just as the image is not produced unless there is the type and wax or some other material. Nor is it wonderful if Elohim the Creator in the beginning made types, from which forms and species may now be expressed. But this is similar to that in the beginning Elohim created insensible elements that he might use for forming and developing all the other things. But even those who form statues first make a mold of clay or wax, and from it the figure of the statue is produced. And then afterwards the shadow is also produced from the statue, which shadow always bears the form and likeness of the statue. What will we say then? That the insensible statue forms a shadow finished with as diligent care as the statue itself? Or will the finishing of the shadow be unhesitatingly ascribed to him who has also fashioned the statue? Chapter 43, Things Apparently Useless and Vile Made by Elohim. If then it seems to you that this is so, and what has been said on this subject is enough, let us come to inquire into other matters, or if you think that something is still wanting, let us go over it again. And the old man said, I wish you would go over this again, since there are many other things that I see to be made in like manner. For both the fruits of the trees are produced in like manner, beautifully formed and wonderfully rounded, and the appearance of the leaves is formed with immense gracefulness, and the green membrane is woven with exquisite art. Then, moreover, will we say that fleas, mice, lizards, such like, are made by Elohim? Hence, from these vile objects, a conjecture is derived concerning the superior, that they are by no means formed by the art of mind. You infer well, said Aquila. Concerning the texture of leaves and concerning small animals, that from these belief is withdrawn from the superior creatures, but these things should not deceive you and cause you to think that Elohim, working as it were only with two hands, could not complete all things that are made, but remember how my brother Niketa answered you yesterday, how he truly disclosed the mystery before the time, as a son speaking with his father, and explained why and how things are made that seem to be useless. Chapter 44, Orderly and Disorderly. Then the old man, I should like to hear from you why those useless things are made by the will of that supreme mind. If, says he, it is totally obvious to you that there is in them the work of mind and reason, and then you will not hesitate to say also why they were made, and to declare that they have been made rightly. To this the old man added, I am not able, my son, to say that those things that seem formed by art are made by mind, by reason of other things that we see to be done unjustly and disorderly in this world. If, says Aquila, those things that are done disorderly do not allow you to say that they are done by Yahweh's providence, why don't these things that are done orderly compel you to say that they are done by Yahweh, and that irrational nature cannot produce irrational work? For it is certain, nor do we at all deny, that in this world some things are done orderly and some disorderly. Should we believe, therefore, that those things that are done rationally are done by providence, but that those things that are done irrationally and inordinately, that seem to befall naturally, are accidents? No, but I wonder that men do not perceive that where there is sense, that things may be done in both an orderly and disorderly fashion. But where there is no sense, neither the one nor the other can be done, for reason makes order, and the course of order necessarily produces something out of order, if anything contrary is allowed to disturb order. Then the old man, I wish you would show me how this very thing is done. Chapter 45, Motions of the Sun and Moon. Says Aquila, I will do so without delay. 2 visible signs are shown in heaven, one of the sun, the other of the moon, and these are followed by 5 other stars, each describing its own separate orbit. These, therefore, Elohim has placed in the sky, by which the temperature of the air may be regulating according to the seasons, and the order of changes and alternations may be kept. But by means of the very same, if at any time he sends plague and corruption upon the earth for the sins of men, the air is disturbed. Pestilence is brought upon animals, blight upon crops, and a destructive year in every way upon men. Thus it is that by one and the same means order is both kept and destroyed. For it is clear even to the unbelieving and unskillful that the course of the sun, which is useful and necessary to the world, and which is assigned by providence, is always kept orderly. But the courses of the moon, in comparison of the course of the sun, seem to the unskillful to be inordinate and unsettled in her waxings and wanings. For the sun moves in fixed and orderly periods. For from him are hours, from him the day when he rises, from him also the night when he sets. From him months and years are reckoned, from him the variations of seasons are produced, while rising to the higher regions, he tempers the spring. But when he reaches the top of the heaven, he kindles the summer's heats. Again, sinking, he produces the temper of autumn. And when he returns to his lowest circle, he bequeaths to us the rigor of winter's cold from the icy binding of heaven. Chapter 46, Sun and Moon both minister good and evil. But we will discourse at greater length on these subjects at another time. Now, meantime, don't we see that though he is the good servant for regulating the changes of the seasons, yet when chastisement is inflicted upon men, according to the will of Elohim, he glows more fiercely and burns up the world with more vehement fires. In like manner also the course of the moon, and that changing that seems to the unskilled to be disorderly is adapted to the growth of crops and cattle and all living creatures. For by her waxings and wanings, by a certain wonderful contrivance of providence, everything that is born is nourished and grows. We could speak about that at more length and unfold the matter in detail, but that seems to be enough to answer the question as proposed. So, by the very same appliances by which they are produced, all things are nourished and increased. On the other hand, when, from any just cause, the regulation of the appointed order is changed, corruption and distemper arise, so that chastisement may come upon men by the will of Elohim, as we have said above. Chapter 47. Chastisements on the righteous and the immoral. But maybe you will say, what of the fact that in the common chastisement, like things befall the good and the evil? It is true, and we confess it, but the chastisement of the righteous turns to their advantage. That, being afflicted in the present life, they may become more purified to the future, in which perpetual Shabbat is prepared for them, and that at the same time even the evil may somewhat profit from their chastisement by turning to righteousness, or else that the just sentence of the future judgment may be passed upon them, since in the same chastisements the righteous give thanks to Yahweh, while the unrighteous blaspheme. Therefore, since the opinion of things is divided into two parts, that some things are done by order and others against order, it ought, from these things that are done according to order, to be believed that there is a providence. But with respect to those things that are done against order, we should look for their causes from those who have learned them by the teaching of the Navi. For those who have become acquainted with the discourse of the Naviim know when and for what reason blight, hail, and pestilence, and similar things have occurred in every generation, and for what sins these have been sent as a punishment, whence causes of sadness, lamentation, and griefs have befallen the human race, whence also trembling sickness has ensued, and that this has been from the beginning the punishment for murder. Chapter 48. Chastisements for sins. For in the beginning of the world there were none of these evils, but they took their rise from the rebellion of men, and thence, with the constant increase of iniquities, the number of evils has also increased. But for this reason Yahweh has decreed a judgment with respect to all men, because the present life was not such that every one could be dealt with according to his deserving. Those things, therefore, that are well and orderly appointed from the beginning, when no causes of evil existed, are not to be judged of from the evils that have befallen the world by reason of the sins of men. In short, as an indication of the things that were from the beginning, some tribes are found that are strangers to these evils. For the Syries, because they live chastely, are kept free from them all. For they do not come at a woman after she has conceived, or while she is being purified. No one there eats unclean flesh. They know nothing of Zebaim, but all are shoftim to themselves according to justice. For this reason they are not chastened with those plagues of which we have spoken. They live to extreme old age and die without sickness. But we, miserable as we are, dwell as it were with deadly serpents, with immoral men, necessarily suffer with them the plagues of afflictions in this world, but we cherish hope from the comfort of good things to come. Chapter 49. Elohim's Precepts Despised. If, said the old man, even the righteous are tormented on account of the iniquities of others, Elohim thought, as foreseeing this, to have commanded men not to do those things from which it should be necessary that the righteous be afflicted with the unrighteous. Or if they did them, he ought to have applied some correction or purification to the whole world. Then Aquila: Elohim did so command and gave precepts to the Naviim how men ought to live. But even these precepts they despised. Indeed, if any desired to observe them, they afflicted them with various injuries until they drove them from their proposed observance, turning them to the rabble of infidelity, and made them like themselves. Chapter 50, The Flood. So, in short, at the first, when all the earth had been stained with sins, Yahweh brought a flood upon the world, which you say was done by Deucalion. And at that time he saved a certain righteous man and with his sons in an ark, and with him the race of all plants and animals. And yet even those who sprang from them after a time again did deeds like to those of their predecessors. For those things that had befallen them were forgotten, so that their descendants did not even believe that the flood had taken place. So Elohim also decreed that there should not be another flood in the present world, else there should have been one in every generation, according to the account of their sins by reason of their unbelief. But he rather granted that certain Malachim who delight in evil should bear sway over the several tribes. And to them was given power over individual men, yet only on this condition: if anyone first had made himself subject to them by sinning, until he should come, who delights in good, and by him the number of the righteous should be completed, and by the increase of the number of obedient men all over the world, disobedience should be in some measure repressed, and it should be known to all that is good is done by Yahweh. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 8, Chapter 51, Evils Brought in by Sin. Aquila speaking. But by the freedom of the will, every man, while he is unbelieving in regard to things to come, runs into evils by doing evil deeds. And these are the things in the world that seem to be done contrary to order, which owe their existence to man's rebellion against Torah. Therefore, the purpose of Yahweh is for men to worship him, which he granted to men in the beginning. They were walking in the good way of life in order to enjoy incorruptible good things. But when they sinned, they gave birth to evil by sin. And to every good thing evil is joined as by a certain covenant of alliance on the part of sin. Since indeed the earth has been polluted with human blood, and altars have been lighted to demons, and they have polluted their very air by the filthy smoke of Zebaim. And so at length the elements, being first corrupted, have handed over to men the fault of their corruption, as the roots nourish the branches and the fruit. Chapter 52, No Rose Without Its Thorn. Observe therefore in this, as I have said, how justly Yahweh comes to the help of those who have been injured, that inasmuch as evils that had derived their origin from sin were associated with the good things of Elohim, he should assign separate chiefs to these two departments. And to him who rejoices in good, he has appointed the ordering of good things, that he might bring those who believe to the faith of his providence. But to him who rejoices in evil, he has given over those things that are done without order and uselessly, from which, of course, the faith of his providence comes into doubt. And thus a just division has been made by a just Elohim. Hence, therefore, it is that whereas the orderly course of the stars produces faith that the world was made by the hand of a designer, on the other hand, the disturbance of the air, the pestilent breeze, the uncontrolled fire of the lightning cast doubts upon the work of providence. For, as we have said, every good thing has its corresponding contrary evil thing joined with it. As hail is opposite to the fertilizing showers, the corruption of mildew is associated with gentle dew. The whirlwinds of storms are joined with the soft winds, unfruitful trees with fruitful, noxious herbs with useful, and wild and destructive animals with gentle ones. But all these things are arranged by Elohim, because that the choice of men's will has departed from the purpose of good and fallen away to evil. Chapter 53. Everything has its corresponding contrary. So this division holds in all the things of the world. And as there are obedient men, so there are also rebellious. As there are Navi'im, so also there are false Navi'im. And amongst the Goyim there are philosophers and false philosophers. Also, the Arabian tribes and many others have imitated the circumcision of the Yahudim for the service of their disobedience. So also, the worship of demons is contrary to the divine worship, mikvah to mikvah, laws to the Torah, false shlikim to shlikim, and false morim to morim. And hence, it is that among the philosophers some assert providence, others deny it. Some maintain that there is one Elohim, others that are more than one. In short, the matter has come to this, that whereas demons are expelled by the word of Elohim, by which it is declared that there is a providence, the magic art for the confirmation of infidelity has found out ways of imitating this by contraries. Thus has been discovered the method of counteracting the poison of serpents by incantations, and the effecting of cures contrary to the word and power of Elohim. The magic art has also found out ministries contrary to the Malachim of Elohim, placing the calling up of spirits and the figments of demons in opposition to these. And not to prolong the discourse by a further enumeration, there is nothing whatever that makes for the belief of providence, which is not something, on the other hand, prepared for unbelief. And therefore, they who do not know that division of things think that there is no providence, by reason of those things in the world that are discordant from themselves. But do you, my father, as a wise man, choose from that division the part that preserves order and makes for the belief of providence? And do not only follow that part that runs against order and neutralizes the belief of providence? Which one? Chapter 54, an illustration. To this the old man answered, Show me a way, my son, by which I may establish in my mind one or the other of these two orders, the one of which asserts and the other denies providence. Aquila answered, To one having a right judgment, the decision is easy. For this very thing that you say, order and disorder, may be produced by a contriver, but not by insensible nature. For let us suppose, by way of illustration, that a great mass were torn from a high rock and cast down headlong, and when clashed upon the ground were broken into many pieces. Could it in any way be that amongst that multitude of fragments there should be found even one that should have any perfect figure and shape? The old man answered, It is impossible. But, said Aquila, if there be present a statuary, he can by his skillful hand and reasonable mind form the stone cut from the mountain into whatever figure he pleases. The old man said, That is true. Therefore, says Aquila, when there is not a rational mind, there may be both form and deformity. For example, if a workman cuts from the mountain a block to which he wishes to give form, he must first cut it out unformed and rough. Then, by degrees, hammering and hewing it by the rule of his art, he expresses the form that he has conceived in his mind. Thus, therefore, from the infirmity or deformity by the hand of the workman, form is attained, and both proceed from the workman. In like manner, therefore, the things that are done in the world are accomplished by the providence of a contriver, although they may seem not quite orderly, and therefore, because these two ways have been made known to you, and you have heard the divisions of them, flee away from the way of unbelief, lest it lead you to that prince who delights in evils, but follow the way of faith, that you may come to that king who delights in good men. Chapter 55, the Two Kingdoms. To this the old man answered, "But why was that prince made who delights in evil, and from what was he made, or was he not made?" Aquila said, "The treatment of that subject belongs to another time, but that you may not go away altogether without an answer to this, I will give a few hints on this subject also. Elohim, foreseeing all things before the creation of the world, knowing that the men who were to be would some of them indeed incline to good, but others to the opposite, assign those who should choose the good to his own government and his own care, and called them his peculiar inheritance. But he gave over the government of those who should turn to evil to those Malachim who, not by their substance, but by opposition, were unwilling to remain with Elohim, being corrupted by the vice of envy and pride. Those, therefore, he made worthy sarim of worthy subjects, and he so delivered them over to these Malachim that they have not the power of doing what they will against them, unless they transgress the bounds assigned to them from the beginning. And this is the bound assigned, that unless one first do the will of the demons have no power over him." Chapter 56, Origin of Evil. Then the old man said, "You have stated it excellently, my son. It now remains only that you tell me whence is the substance of evil. For if it was made by Elohim, the evil fruit shows that the root is at fault, for it appears that it also is of an evil nature. But if this substance was co-ageless with Elohim, how can that which was equally unproduced and co-ageless be subject to the other?"
"It was not always," said Aquila,
"but neither does it necessarily follow, if it was made by Elohim, that its creator should be thought to be such as is that which has been made by him. For indeed, Elohim made the substance of all things, but if a reasonable mind, which has been made by Elohim, does not acquiesce in the Torah of its Creator, and go beyond the bounds of the temperance prescribed to it, how does this reflect on the Creator? Or if there is any reason higher than this, we do not know it. For we cannot know anything perfectly, especially concerning those things for our ignorance of which we are not to be judged. But those things for which we are to be judged are most easy to be understood and are dispatched almost in a word. For almost the whole rule of our actions is summed up in this, that what we are unwilling to suffer we should not do to others. For as you would not be killed, you must beware of killing another. And as you would not have your own marriage violated, you must not defile another's bed. You would not be stolen from, neither must you steal, and every matter of men's action is comprehended within this rule. Chapter 57. The Old Man Unconvinced. Then the old man, "Do not take amiss, my son, what I am going to say. Though your words are powerful, yet they cannot lead me to believe that anything can be done apart from Genesis. For I know that all things have been done to me by the necessity of Genesis, and therefore I cannot be persuaded that either to do well or to do ill is in our power. And if we have not our actions in our power, I cannot believe that there is a I cannot believe that there is a judgment to come by which either punishments may be inflicted on the evil or rewards bestowed on the good. In short, since I see that you are initiated in this sort of learning, I will lay before you a few things from the art itself. If, says Aquila, you wish to add anything from that science, my brother Clement will answer you with all care, since he has attended more fully to the science of mathematics. For I can maintain in other ways that our actions are in our own power, but I ought not to presume upon those things that I have not learned." Chapter 58. Sitting in Judgment upon Yahweh. And when Aquila had thus spoken, then I, Clement, said, "Tomorrow, my father, you will speak as you please, and we will gladly hear you. For I suppose it will also be gratifying to you that you have to do with those who are not ignorant of the science that you profess. When therefore it had been settled between the old man and me that on the following day we should hold a discussion on the subject of Genesis, whether all things are done under its influence, or there be anything in us not done by Genesis, but by the judgment of the mind, Kepha rose up, and he began to speak to the following effect. To me, it is exceedingly wonderful that things that can easily be found out men make difficult by hidden thoughts and words, and those especially who think themselves wise and who, wishing to comprehend the will of Yahweh, treat Elohim as if he were a man. Indeed, as if he were something less than a man, for no one can know the purpose or mind of a man unless he himself reveal his thoughts. And neither can anyone learn a profession unless he be for a long time instructed by a master. How much more must it be that no one can know the mind or work of the invisible and incomprehensible Elohim? He must himself send a Navi to declare his purpose and expound the way of his creation, so far as it is lawful for men to learn it. Hence I think it is ridiculous when men judge of the power of Elohim in natural ways and think that this is possible and that impossible to him, or this greater and that less, while they are ignorant of everything, who being unrighteous judge the righteous Yahweh, unskilled judge the contriver, corrupt judge the incorruptible, created judge the Creator. Chapter 59, the Navi met Yahshua. But I would not have you think that in saying this I take away the power of judging concerning things, but I give counsel that no one walk through devious places and rush into errors without end. And therefore I advise not only wise men, but indeed all men who have a desire of knowing what is advantageous to them, that they might seek after the Navi Amet Yahshua, for it is he alone who knows all things, and who knows what and how every man is seeking. For he is within the mind of every one of us. But in those who have no desire of the knowledge of Elohim and his righteousness, he is inoperative. But he works in those who seek after that which is profitable to their spirits, and kindles in them the light of knowledge. So seek him first of all, and if you do not find him, do not expect that you will learn anything from any other. But he is soon found by those who diligently seek him through love of the truth, and whose spirits are not taken possession of by immorality. For he is present with those who desire him in the innocence of their spirits, who bear patiently and draw sighs from the bottom of their hearts through love of the truth. But he deserts malevolent minds, because as a Navi he knows the thoughts of everyone. And therefore let no one think that he can find him by his own wisdom, unless, as we've said, he empty his mind of all immorality and conceive a pure and faithful desire to know him. But when anyone has so prepared himself, he himself, as a Navi, seeing a mind prepared for him, of his own accord offers himself to his knowledge. Chapter 60. The deliverances not to be questioned. Therefore, if anyone wishes to learn all things, he must do so little by little. For being mortal, he'll not be able to comprehend all at once the counsel of Elohim and to scan immensity itself. But if, as we have said, he desires to learn all things, let him seek after the Navi Amet, and when he has found him, let him not treat with him by questions and disputations and arguments. But if he has given any response or pronounced any judgment, it cannot be doubted that this is certain. And therefore, before all things, let the Navi Amet be sought, and his words be laid hold of. In respect to these, this only should be discussed by everyone, that he may satisfy himself if they are truly Davarim HaNavi, that is, if they contain undoubted faith of things to come, if they mark out definite times, if they preserve the order of things, if they do not relate as last those things that are first, nor as first those things that were done last, if they contain nothing subtle, nothing composed by magic art to deceive, or if they have not transferred to themselves things that were revealed to others, and have mixed them with falsehoods. And when all these things have been discussed by right judgment, it is established that they are the words of the Navi, so they ought to be at once believed concerning all things on which they have spoken and answered. Chapter 61, Ignorance of the Philosophers. For let us consider carefully the work of Yahweh. For whereas the philosophers have introduced certain subtle and difficult words, so that not even the terms that they use in their discourses can be known and understood by all, Yahweh has shown that those who thought themselves word framers are altogether unskillful as respects the knowledge of the truth. For the knowledge of things that is imparted by the Naviim at Yeshua is simple and plain and brief, which those men walking through devious places and through the stony difficulties of words are wholly ignorant of. Therefore, to modest and simple minds, when they see things come to pass that have been foretold, it's enough and more than enough that they may receive most certain knowledge from the most certain foreknowledge. And for the rest, may they be at shalom, having received evident knowledge of the truth. For all other things are treated by opinion, in which there can be nothing firm. For what speech is there that may not be contradicted? And what argument is there that may not be overthrown by another argument? And hence it is that by disputation of this sort, men can never come to any end of knowledge and learning, but find the end of their life sooner than the end of their questions. Chapter 62, End of the Conference. And therefore, since amongst these things are uncertain, we must come to the Navi Emet. Abba Yahweh wants him to be loved by all, and accordingly he has been pleased wholly to extinguish those opinions that have originated with men, and in regard to which there is nothing like certainty, that he might be the more sought after, and that he whom they had obscured should show to men the way of truth. For on this account also Elohim made the world and filled it, whence also he is everywhere near to them who seek him, though he is sought in the most remotest ends of the earth. But if anyone seeks him not in a pure, set-apart, and faithful manner, he is indeed within him, because he is everywhere, and is found within the minds of all men. But as we have said before, he is dormant to the unbelieving, and is held to be absent from those to whom his existence is not believed. Then when Kepha had said this, and more to the same effect concerning Yeshua, he dismissed the crowds. And when he very earnestly entreated the old man to remain with us, he could prevail nothing. But he also departed to return the next day, as had been agreed upon. And after this, we also, with Kepha, went to our lodgings and enjoyed our accustomed food and rest. This is the end of the Nazarene Acts, Book 8.